Yeah, everybody's raising their hands. So, uh, good evening, everybody. It's just after 5 o'clock. Welcome to the Thursday, March 21st Nantucket Conservation Meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members who are present can be heard. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal,
Here.
Tim Brain,
Here.
Seth Engelborg,
Here.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Here.
Joe Plandowski,
Here.
Linda Williams.
Here.
This meeting is being held entirely remotely, so all participants are participating via Zoom. The public may participate via YouTube. There are directions on the Times website as to how to join. If anybody wishes to speak, please raise your hand either in your camera window or virtually and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please state your name and any relationship you might have to the project before speaking. Please keep your devices muted when you're not speaking so that you're not picked up by the recording or creating a distraction. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We'll start the meeting with public comment on items not being heard this evening. And if there's no public input, then moving on to public hearing notices of intent, the following are continued. Manila 5 Gingy Lane till April 4th. Third Point Holding LLC, 39 Quays Road, April 4th. Vandenborn 135 Walwinet Road, the 4th of April, and Slozak and Tuckanuck Island continued until the 4th of April. And so that brings us on to the discussions of a potential adoption of the Nantucket Wetland Regulations update. So first of all, thank you, staff, for providing all the copies. And who would like to open up on behalf of commissioners as to which version they'd like to promote? Mike, I see your hand up, and then Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not exactly sure what extent we're going to discussion on this tonight because there's been there was a version that just didn't get up on the website until Tuesday. So I guess I'll start my continued on the setbacks, for example, the 25 to 50 for no disturb and the 50 to 75 for no build, and some restrictions within 100. Unless you're attending Concom meetings regularly, the majority of the public isn't quite aware yet on how these changes will affect things, and that's not the fault of the commission, or it's not the fault of the staff. People have busy lives, and that's the way it is. But as the setbacks are proposed right now, they're a little too all or nothing for my support. And with climate change the way it is, I think there's got to be some discussions to live with water and not retreat from it entirely. I mean, there's certainly going to be practical things that are already in the regulation changes that can be supported. But I would like to see personally on the setbacks some more discussions with the stakeholders and how we can improve the situation within the current regulations that we have. Because I fear it's gonna take a lot of work and put it onto staff, and unintended consequences. As I can't give a specific example, but people going rogue and doing things on their property because they don't think they can get permission to do it. So those are just my thoughts on where we are with those right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Linda?
I agree with everything Mike said, and I will add to this, if there's going to be a discussion about a sunset date or something like that for that particular thing to take place, it's going to cause chaos. Because I've been through this before with the zoning bylaw where they put these dates on in the future and then everybody went wacky, especially with the building cap. I am not in favor of going forward with that part of it. I think we would have had these regulations, the rest of the regulations approved months ago without this one issue. I'm prepared to vote on the regulations today without that issue. And I was a little concerned it didn't show up on the website until Tuesday night also. I didn't realize that there were two different versions linked. I just heard that from somebody about a half an hour ago, and they both took you to the same place. So it's confusing. It's causing a lot of disruption. I'd like to get the rest of the regulations updated. I think they've done a great job on those. My other question through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff, did they ever try to marry what we're doing with the changes up at the state level? I know we talked about that in like December, I think. Did we ever get a chance to do that with all the work that's coming into the office? I guess Will is here.
Ian, point of order. I think Tobias Glidden had his hand up early on for a public comment.
Tobias, was your comment for matters that weren't being heard?
Can I finish mine first before we retract, or do you want me to just
No,
hold
no.
on here?
No, Linda, I thought you had finished.
No,
I did
I
too.
asked a
Sorry.
question to staff through you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman,
Thank
to
you,
Will.
Linda. Thank you, Linda. You're absolutely correct. And I apologize for truncating your train of thought. And so, Jeff, would you like to respond to that, please?
Sure. No, I can confirm that Will did the initial review comparing any of our changes to the updated state regulations that are still proposed. They haven't been adopted yet. And then we went over that, and we don't believe that there's any real significant conflicts.
Okay, thank you. I still am not prepared to vote for that setback change, but I'd love to vote for the rest of the regulations tonight. Get them off the
Thank you,
table.
Linda. Thank you, Linda. And so if commissioners don't object, do you mind if I recognize Tobias Glidden, assuming that he missed the window for matters that aren't before us tonight? Is that acceptable with everybody? Okay, thank you. Tobias?
Thank you, Chairman Goling. I wanted to speak on the wetlands protection regulations you had before you this evening. Is this an appropriate time to do this? This is the
No, it isn't. In other words, first of all, commissioners weigh in, then members of the public weigh in. So,
Thank you. I'll wait my moment to be recognized.
okay. So, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a few comments here. I think that putting the buffer zone discussion aside, I think that there is pretty good cohesion within the commission about the rest of the proposed updates. That said, respectfully, I disagree with my fellow commissioners in that we're providing a buffer zone change that's inflexible, because actually we've gone through a process and we've gone through some language with staff to create an exemption that's in the new regulations as proposed that is exactly the type of flexibility that builders and property owners have been asking for. So although a no build zone may be increased to 75 foot, there is specific exemptions and specific process to allow buildings still to be constructed up to the 50-foot zone. I think this is the exact type of compromise that the public has been asking for, and I think we should adopt it. If we need more discussion on how it will work or the logistics of it, that's fine. But I think that is the point of that exemption that was added. I would also say 2 points. One, with respect to Linda's point about an effective date of regulations and a frenzy of applications coming in before that effective date. I'm pretty sure no matter what changes we make, there's going to be a frenzy of applications. It happened the last time. It happened the time before with that. It happens every time. So there's only so much we can do to buffer against that. I think the minimum effective date we can make is 3 weeks past the vote. But if we want more time for the public to react, we can do whatever we want. We can make it 6 months, we could make it a year, we could make it 5 years. I mean, it's up to us to determine when the effective date should be. And then that's all my comments on the buffer zones, but I have a comment on a separate topic if you would like me to continue.
Please do.
Okay. So I was prepared to, close this hearing and make a motion to vote on the regulations tonight. But I think there is something that we've overlooked in the regulatory change that needs to be addressed. And it has to do with the performance standards to coastal banks related to pre-78 structures. And there is a discrepancy in our bylaws and with the wording in the Wetlands Protection Act. So our bylaw specifically allows for coastal engineering structures to protect pre-78 structures or public infrastructure. In the Wetlands Protection Act, it says buildings, and it doesn't say anything about public infrastructure. And I think the definition between structure and building is significant. And I think it's already significant, but if you will remember from this current update, we're actually making the definition of structure even broader to include things like patios and short walls and things that, are going to be considered structural under our new regulations. And this is actually probably going to make the regulatory standard that we have in our bylaw for coastal engineering structures weaker. If properties have pre-existing stone patios on their lots, theoretically under their bylaws, they could, apply for protection under a coastal engineering structure under that patio. So I don't think we want to do that. I think we need to either adopt the buildings word that is used in the Wetlands Protection Act, or even be more specific about what types of buildings. We have the ability to be more specific and more stringent in our bylaw and our regulations, but we absolutely should not use the word structure. I think that has unintended consequences, and I think we have to have a discussion about that. And I think honestly, we should probably take out the public infrastructure piece of it as well, because it causes regulatory confusion between our regulations and the Wetlands Protection Act. And if we want to provide other ways to deal with that, we can, but I think we should align the language a little bit more specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Jeff, I noticed you had your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to comment really quickly, if I may, on the question that's come up about effective date. And I think we've been talking a lot about it at a staff level for how to best implement that and kind of getting some feedback from folks. And just to cover it now so it can be out in the discussion, I think our recommendation for an effective date that makes a lot of sense if this were to get adopted in tonight or the next week or in the early part of April here. We would probably recommend the 1st of July as a effective date for a lot of different reasons, and just to touch on a few of them briefly is that's also the date where there may be any turnover on the commission. So there's kind of a natural break in who's doing the hearings and who's participating. It also gives folks, anywhere from, 2 to 3 months to figure out if they want to file, if they want to make adjustments to a project. Some projects are probably, ready to be filed in the next 45 to 60 days, that it would still give them a chance that they've, put effort towards design and engineering for to still be within there. And it gives plenty of time for public notice to get out and questions to get answers and things that are there. That seems to be about in our eyes, the most logical date for that.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, Linda?
Given what Seth just said, I'd like those sections pulled out that he's referring to, along with the Wetlands Protection Act language and our language that we're proposing at the moment, to take a look at it ourselves between now and next week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And I know for a fact that what was posted up there is confusing the public as to the setback thing and the new language, because the links don't go where you think they're going and they're different. So I know I'm getting comments that it's confusing to the public, the new language, the new proposal, and they haven't had time to digest it. It came up on Tuesday night to digest it, to talk about what the impacts are on their projects or their people or the island or whatever. So I guess we're not voting in the regs tonight. So that's all I have to say, because there's more stuff that has to be discussed vis-a-vis what Seth said, and there's some merit to what he said.
Thank you, Linda. There is merit to what he said, but that could be easily changed in seconds. So from my perspective, as to the points you're making about the confusion, I didn't find it confusing. That perhaps I didn't look at it from the point of view of being someone who'd never looked at it before. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly say, I know it's up there in the pack that's there for the wetland update regulations. And there's listed with the buffer zone changes and staff buffer zone changes, but those are complete versions. So when you click on them, it's all of the regulations with the changes exactly how they would read. So if you just look at the first page, there won't be any difference, because the only difference is within the performance standards. If people are getting questions and people are confused, please refer them to our office. We're happy to help and happy to get them questions. As far as I know, and I could check with Lisa, no one has contacted us with that confusion to our office. So I apologize for folks that's happening, but please come see us, please come call us. We're happy to help. So
I think the comments, Mr. Chairman, through you, that I've gotten is that they didn't know it was there on Tuesday.
Okay,
So,
Linda.
and that portion of the pack was originally posted about a month ago on February 21st. So it's been around for a bit. Again, if people have questions and people are getting that feedback, please shoot them our way and we'll help them and get them the information that they want. I'm not trying to be accusatory that people are not finding it or doing that. They very well may. Again, we're here to help, so please send them to us and we're happy to help them.
Okay, so on that note, should we defer until April the 4th? And hopefully by then, all the confusion will have been addressed. Seth's suggestion will be added. And then perhaps we will have, well, actually, so I'm sorry, I guess I'm jumping the gun here because it's incumbent on me to listen to members of the public first. So I apologize for cutting you off prematurely. And then I noticed that Seth has his hand up again. So as a commissioner, what would you like to say, Seth?
Yes, thank you. I mean, apart from the comment I already made, I think that some of the decisions are just like procedural level. The staff can make, do we want to replace structure with building, right? And some of it is more of a, I guess, robust discussion. Like, do we want to clarify more about the types of buildings that are eligible for protection or not? So I think we do need to have a discussion probably tonight among the commissioners to then inform what the staff are gonna write.
Thank you, Seth. And on that, yes, Joe, I know you had your hand up before. I apologize for not having recognized you earlier.
Am I recognized now?
You certainly are.
All right. I support expansion of the no-build buffer zone. And I was thinking that the effective date might be January 1 of 25, which should take care of a whole pile of people that might think they have problems today. There was another issue in the regs that that I looked at, which doesn't tie in very well on the swimming pool portion. And that has to do with, we keep writing these orders of conditions that say if you're draining the pool, generally it's got to get hauled off your property on a truck. Yet you hear from the sewage plant people, they might see a half dozen trucks a year. Somehow or other, we ought to look at those regulations and get some more clarity in there, or at least responsibility. And the third item is we received a document on stormwater provisions. I saw the draft of that from the state a while ago, but I don't think we should be acting on that right now because it's not finalized at the state level. That's it.
Thank you, Joe. And I appreciate you reading it so carefully. Linda, do you have anything further to say that you haven't said before?
Well, if we're going to postpone the discussion on the building versus structure, I just wanted to point out that the building code and the zoning code uses the word structure, not building. And depending on what the use is, what kind of place they're allowed and when they're not allowed on a lot by itself. So I'm still confused about the word building versus structure because I only deal with structure in my line of work, not building. And I don't understand the difference between building and structure, but I'm also troubled by saying what kinds of buildings can be protected because we have some fairly sizable ancillary structures that are pre-78. And I'm afraid if we limit it to dwelling or some such thing, we're going to have a problem. A lot of the waterfront buildings are not dwellings. So I think that requires more discussion that maybe we want to get into tonight if we're going to postpone the rest of it.
So when you said they aren't dwellings, that implies that the difference between structure and dwelling is that a dwelling is habitable and a structure isn't.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying simply that if Seth made the comment about deciding what kinds of buildings versus the word structure that we may want to protect on pre-78. So that's why I'm saying there's a little more to this than I prepared to discuss tonight because I hadn't even thought about that exchange of the two words.
Seth, would you like to comment on anything you haven't talked about before?
Yes. Oh, just to clarify, and this is the exact discussion I was hoping to have. So it's a two-part discussion. Well, it's really a three-part discussion. The first is that I hear you, Linda, about the zoning code and the building code, but the Wetlands Protection Act, which is, more relevant to our process, specifically says building. So should we align it with that is the question. And then the second part is we're drastically increasing the types of structures that are going to be counted as structures in the new regulations. In our new regulations, proposed regulations, dry laid stone patios, recreational playing courts, roads, parking areas, parking lots, driveways, drainage basins, there's a whole list of things that are going to be considered structures. So if we use the word structure, it has other consequences. And then the third part is, I don't necessarily have an opinion on it or not. I hear you, but it might just make it easier to specifically delineate the type of structure that's protectable, rather than just allowing our regulations to talk about all the structures. So that's just my thoughts here. And I think it requires full commission input and probably a full commission decision, but I am wary that increasing the definition of structure is going to have unintended consequences to that specific performance standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And I would agree. And so I think we can easily avoid that issue by modifying the pre-78 definition to habitable dwelling, and that structures are specifically excluded. And I'm very glad you brought that up. And do we have any further comments from commissioners? Lyndon, I don't want to go backwards and forwards on this. You've made your point clear. So
No, I'm just responding to your comment just now. I would absolutely not vote in favor of that, period.
fine. So that will come up then. So are there any further comments from commissioners? And yes, Joan.
So when are we going to vote on this? Can we pick a date and just say that's the date it's going to happen?
Well, let's listen to public input first before we discuss that. And there's nothing stopping us from voting today if we choose on aspects of it. And so in order of hands up, it's first Tobias Glidden, then Dan Malloy, and then Frank Daly that I can see on my screen. So Tobias, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. Tobias Glidden here from Axmart Solar. I have attended dutifully the last 4 of your meetings waiting for this item to come up. So I'm sorry it took so long. I didn't realize you were about to be voting on it this evening, but I just wanted to, I sent Will some photos of some solar arrays we install, and I thought it would be helpful. I wanted to reach out to the board in a constructive, useful fashion in order to reduce bureaucracy with the board, save the board time, and facilitate a conversation around solar. We do install solar. We've had many applications before you over the years. We'll have more in the future, and I wanted to just take the opportunity to make myself available and say, we install solar in within the buffer zone. It's very low impact. We use ground screws, and I just wanted to facilitate a conversation, making sure that that was included in some sort of your definitions this evening. I'm not sure if Will is able to pull up any of those photos I emailed him, but I thought it would be useful. Over the years, it is a kind of a tedious process for us to present a large application for a solar array. So I wanted to facilitate the conversation. Is there a more straightforward way we can do it? I'm not used to presenting to the Concom, but I am generally very familiar. So I just wanted to encourage the board to think about that. I'm happy to reach out to the board staff to have further discussions, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. Maybe I'm throwing myself under the bus, but I wanted to do it in the sense of, I think there can be a streamlined way of getting solar. It's something I believe the board's very supportive of when it's done in the right way. So that's my pitch on solar. Lastly, I just had 2 things just as a general comment. One is that I really think public access is really necessary on all these structures. There's a lot of areas where there's no stairways up and over, revetments and whatnot that have been done over the years. And I would just encourage the board to make sure, more access is in place. And then the last piece, I just wanted to mention that in a number of areas just walking around this winter, there's a number of just metal stakes that are just rusting away. And you see them in relation to these coastal structures, and it would be great if we didn't have metal stakes anymore because they just rust. And
thank you, Tobias.
Thank you.
That would be something you would bring up, and this is not suitable for bringing that up. And so if you wish to bring that up at another meeting about matters not being discussed, that would be a perfect setting for it.
So that's for the solar, or?
And we've heard what you've had to say, and we're talking strictly about regulations right now, not any incidental observations, which you're welcome to make at a future date. And thank you very much. So do you have anything further to say about our actual regulatory updates and process?
I guess my question would be is, I just, is solar a structure?
That Will, did we have that in as, I don't believe, I assume that it would be considered a structure. And if it isn't in there, I forget, then that's something we can address going forward. Yes, Jeff?
I would just confirm that historically for us, ground-mounted solar arrays have been considered a structure.
Right.
Just as an example, like when we heard the large-scale array out at Bartlett Farm, that was heard as a structure.
Right. Right. Thank you, Tobias. Dan? Could you identify yourself, please, for the minute taker?
Sure, Dan Malloy, Site Design Engineering. So I'll try to be quick. So I've been trying. I think I've attended every one of the board's meetings regarding regulation changes. I may have missed one. And one of the questions that I think I've missed, maybe it's happened, maybe it hasn't. But at any point in time, has the commission really taken the time in a public meeting to go section by section? Because every time I hear the regulations, we're just jumping all over the place. No one is, there's a few hot button topics, but we're never going back to start at section 100, talk about the changes, vote. Section 103, review, voted. So there's multiple changes that are in here that I just don't recall there ever being any public discussion, whether it's a definition change or if it's some of the other sections, when all of the discussions I'm hearing really have to do with buffer zone changes, and occasionally for a while was groundwater, but we're not even talking about that now. And it doesn't seem to be a consensus whether everybody's reviewed it, actually has a question on it, or if it's just going to be a wholesale vote at some point with really any public discussion, all the details. That's just a question.
Okay, so Dan, this has been going on for years. And as you well know, and at least 2 years under Ashley's chairmanship. And so I'm sort of baffled for people to say that they're either taken by surprise or unaware what has been discussed. I'm not saying that you're saying that. In terms of sectional review, I think my approach has been more over the years, making notes to my own wetlands regulations. And so that when the subject has come up for review, I've made comments on the direction I think we've had to go. If you have any specific suggestions, it would be a great help to us if you could provide them in writing for us. Because ultimately, it's...
Well, I mean, I definitely have a few comments I can throw out there, and I'm happy to send in another letter to it as well. So,
Sure.
I mean, a couple of the comments, I won't go through everything, I'll just go through 2 or 3. So one of the simple comments under some of the definition changes to do with anything that's eroding, for example, whether it's a coastal bank or a beach, the wording and the definitions of those has been changed so that typically the commission's jurisdiction is 100-foot buffer zone. But there's been a change in some of the wording where now it says the setback for a structure from, say, a coastal beach or a coastal bank is to be 20 times the average erosion rate or 100 feet. So are you effectively now putting in place a 100-foot setback, or if there's an erosion rate that's more than 5 feet a year, or are you creating a setback that's beyond your buffer zone? So is that something that's being put in place now that's actually beyond the commission's jurisdiction?
Well, we've had the discussion about other jurisdictions within the Commonwealth that often don't allow building within 200 feet of protected interests. I don't think that particular example that you're giving is an underhand way of trying to increase the buffer zone. And thank you for bringing it to our attention, because it sounds as though we might have to broaden the definition to make sure that either is a possibility. So
maybe it could be clearer. So I guess just one other question. Under section 390.16, land subject to coastal storm flowage. So there's a new performance standard proposed, number 4, And it essentially says that, I won't read the whole thing, but the very first sentence essentially prohibits any construction within any type of flood zone. The way that it's worded, it's not whether you comply with flood zone requirements. It's essentially stating that anything built in that is no longer allowed, period. Because anything, the way it's worded, if it interacts or could be damaged by any type of flooding, it's not allowed. And that's new. And I don't really recall hearing any discussion about that. And I'm not even sure if anybody's noticed the way that's worded, what that really states. So I'd like that to be out there for people to read these things, because I don't think, what I'm trying to get at is a lot of other groups and committees and boards we work with, when they're making changes, they'll go through section by section and hammer out any questions, any issues. They might even vote that section in right when they're done talking. If it's okay, then move on to the next section. And we're not getting that completeness. That I don't feel like we're getting a thorough review here, because everybody's just, like I said, we're bouncing around instead of just knocking them off as you go. I think it's much easier for you to do that and quicker to get the process done. So
Thank
I'll
you.
send a letter in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Let me see. Yes, Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with respect to Mr. Malloy, I hear his points, but these are not changes. The standard that he is referencing related to eroding shorelines for coastal banks exists in the regulations today. It's existed for over 10 years at this point. So, there's no concern there. And the other standard he's referencing in land subject to coastal storm flowage related to building upon areas subject to coastal storm flowage, that exists too. That definition has been slightly changed. I'll admit that. But a similar definition exists in the regulations today. So these two things I think are not a concern. They already exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Frank Daly.
Good evening. Frank Daly. I am president of Daly Construction, as well as the president of the Nantucket Builders Association. As much as I'm speaking on behalf of my company, my organization, I'm primarily here as a private landowner, as a citizen of Nantucket. I don't want to be too long, but I also feel like there are a lot of things here to discuss. I first want to thank the commissioners who have taken the time to meet with me individually, have spoken at length about both the details of some of these changes, proposed changes, as well as their intent. I also really appreciate that the commission has allowed me to speak at every one of these meetings. I feel like I've been involved probably as much as anybody else on this matter. So I really do thank you for that. And I also appreciate that there has been some evolving regulations or proposed regulations throughout this process. However, I'm still really concerned about the process itself. I think you've heard some members of the public already express this. I think you've also heard a couple commissioners. And the tone is a little bit different tonight. It sounds, it's been a little bit dismissive of some of these people's concerns. Dan Malloy is somebody who's, as you all know, is an expert in this field, and to say that, the things that he are bringing up are just kind of brushed to the side so quickly is a little concerning. I heard the select board last night talk about the need for in-person meetings across the board for all town governance. They specifically referenced the need for commissions to have a public element. I strongly encourage this commission to heed those words of the select board for us to meet in public. It's been very difficult to have this kind of public engagement. I brought this up at a prior meeting that the state, as it's working through its updated regulations, is hosting educational sessions. It's actively going out to stakeholders to gain their input, to teach the stakeholders and the general public what is in the regulations, to get feedback, so that we can collectively work on what's best for the regulations, how to implement them, to hear what some of these unintended consequences may be. And I, again, encourage this commission to do the same by having a little bit more public outreach, engaging more of us, and of course, doing this in public so we can actually be in the same room with each other. I think it was about a month ago that this Zoom format completely changed, where the only people who can actually even see who's, well, a month ago, we couldn't even see each other who was at the meeting. Now it's, if you're allowed to speak, you can then see who else is present. It's just a very strange process. And
All right, Frank, I'm going to ask you to, first of all, I don't want any ad hominem implications about how commissioners may or may not be reacting to members of the public. I don't think that's helpful. Secondly, I remember at least 2 meetings in the whatever that box construction is called next to the old fire station. But those were both open to the public with members of the public actually there. One was, what, 1.5 years ago. So,
Right.
you know, from my perspective, having followed this for 6 years now, there's been an awful lot of room for public comment. But that clearly there are members of the public that feel that their comments haven't been fully addressed. And so the process continues. And do you have anything specifically that you want us to focus on again? Or
Yes.
okay,
Yes, I do.
well, please continue.
Again, just to reiterate, the main point was not to have an ad hominem attack, which is certainly not why I used anybody's name. I just wanted to bring something up in general. But my real point here is that the select board last night said that it's important to engage the public in person. That's a very important piece here. I'm trying to speak generally about the process itself. Commissioner Engelberg brought that up tonight as well, that there's a lot of confusion, whether it comes down to things like structures versus buildings. One thing that wasn't, a couple of people have spoken on, but you haven't really thought about is, what about a commercial building? I don't know where that falls into these regulations. I don't think that's clearly spelled out. So I think by having more engagement, we'll be able to iron out some of these details. I also did want to clarify that if you do click on the town's links for the meeting tonight, section 390-26, whether it's the setbacks or not the setbacks link, they both go to the same place. The language is exactly the same. I went word for word, and I know I'm not the smartest man, but I'm pretty good at hitting hyperlinks. And so again, that's just an example of the process being a little bit confusing. Now, that's all one section. Another thing I just wanted to kind of bring to the board commission's attention is that some of the more specific issues, this need for change of regulation is prefaced with the idea of acknowledging sea level rise. There is a project that the land bank and the town just came together on Washington Street. It's a pretty significant thing about, how are we dealing with the rising water there? And we all can feel differently about it, but some of the language in this, where we're not allowing to have bulkheads and have some of these coastal engineering structures while seeing something like this happen downtown, they seem like they're in opposition of each other. And is the solution to try to engineer our way out of this, or are we trying to create regulations where we can't? And that's just something I just want to bring up to the board's attention, because I agree, sea levels are rising. We all see it. Erosion is happening. How do we deal with it? Some of these regulations make it look like it's going to be a lot harder for all of us on Nantucket to continue living on Nantucket if we keep moving away and our roads are flooding and things are washing away. Groundwater separation, I couldn't find that section in the packet for tonight. I don't know if that last meeting we talked about, or maybe it's 2 meetings ago, about that 2-foot separation coming out of the language. I'm not sure if that's in there tonight. Through you, Chairman, if I could ask Jeff that.
By all means.
The commission never took action to formally remove that, so it's still within bordering vegetated wetland.
Okay.
But that's the only area that it's within.
Okay. I could go on and on. I think I've taken enough of your time tonight. I hope that the larger picture of what I'm trying to present here is heard. I would love to have an opportunity to again speak with individual members of the commission. I again want to express my appreciation for you guys working on this and listening to those of us who have shown up. I certainly don't want to make this an attack on any of you. I think you've done great work, and I know your intention is to help preserve this island. I just want more of the public to be involved and to try to express some of my own concerns. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you for your letter that you wrote on behalf of the Builders Association, what, 9 months ago now, which I think, we've all read and tried to take into account. Katie?
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Katie Barnacle with Ilex Environmental, and I did submit a 2-page comment letter today, and I apologize for getting it so late to the commission members, but it has been very overwhelming recently because we're reviewing, since the beginning of the year, the Wetlands Protection Act regulation revisions from the state, but also Chapter 91 Waterfront Act revisions that are proposed, and water quality under the state Massachusetts Clean Water Act regulations, and then the Nantucket regs. So there's a lot of regulations that are being revised right now, and it's a little overwhelming. And actually, my review of those regulations brought me back to the Nantucket regs when I was looking at the McFerm sea level rise modeling that's being required. And this is also changes that are in the the Waterfront Act, or Chapter 91, and also alluded to in the Wetlands Protection Act. And we noticed that the definitions in the your bylaw revisions that are proposed include adding the definition for sea level rise, which is absolutely needed. I don't think anyone's arguing that we should not be discussing about modeling sea level rise for any proposed work, and that you do have a comprehensive coastal resiliency plan, the CRP, that Nantucket has, and that's an excellent plan. There's a lot of really good information and about planning and modeling for the future, but our concerns are the use of the McFerm sea level rise, projected sea level rise model. And the McFerm stands for the Massachusetts Flood Risk Model, Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, McFerm, that we've been finding that model has had a lot of problems. In fact, recently, Mass DOT, who actually funded the creation of the McFerm model, is indicating that the information coming out of these models is way too conservative. And I don't have any specific numbers where I can tell you right now that under, say, the NOAA flood model, it's going to be 2 feet of elevation rise, and the McFerm is 6.5 feet of elevation rise, but there seems to be a distinct difference in these two models. And in your definition for sea level rise, you note that for sea level rise projections, I believe the wording is shall or must use McFerm for these analysis. And what we're suggesting or recommending of the commission is to make that language less specific to the model used and allow the scientific and engineering communities to use whatever models are available, because this is new information. These are relatively new models. These models are going to change over time. Our mapping is getting better. Our data collection is getting better. We're getting more data in, and we need to keep up with, the newest and best information that's out there to use. So we would really like to recommend that you revise the definition of sea level rise to not specifically require any model. In fact, don't mention any model, because models are going to change. In fact, this McFerm model is proprietary. It's not even managed by the state of Massachusetts. It's owned by a private consulting firm. The NOAA model is available in public. And so I think there needs to be some flexibility in which models that we use, and not be stuck in one specific model. That model may be the one that we use, but I don't think we should be made to use that model when there are other models that might be more accurate based on more accurate information, because these are all projected sea level rise models. We're projecting something based on existing information and then the projections. Models have different data, different inputs, different probabilities, and it's becoming evident that there's a big difference between these models, the outcome. You know, it could be 1 foot here and 6 foot in this other model. So when you're designing a project and you have to elevate something 1 foot versus 6 feet, that's a significant difference. It's a significant cost difference. And there also might be other options that are available to people depending if it's a 1 foot elevation rise or a 6 foot elevation rise. So it's a complicated issue, but I'm hoping that the recommendation, the language change, is a relatively simple wording change that can be adopted by the commission, which allows for the scientific and engineering community to evolve as the science and this need for sea level rise analysis evolves. So my letter goes into a little more technical detail, but I don't think we need to get into that. But I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone about that. I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I don't do the models, but this is a lot of information that we're also going to be submitting to the state, or comments we're submitting to the state under the Chapter 91 reg revisions and the Wetlands Protection Act revisions. So
thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And I'm sure staff are taking note, as we are, of your suggestion that we use a broader system of modeling as we go forward on this. So Seth, you've had your hand up. Do you have some comments you wish to make before I recognize Amy Cohane and RJ Turcott? Or do you want to wait until the public input is finished?
I would like to make a comment, please.
Please do so.
Thank you. And I understand what Ms. Barnacle is saying. I believe the reason to use that model was that specifically the model called out in the Coastal Resilience Plan for Nantucket. And the idea was to synchronize that planning effort with the regulatory capacity that the Conservation Commission has. So I'll defer to staff and Crack for further input there. But it was an attempt to make sure that we are using the same models across the island and sort of not doing what you're talking about and allowing people to make their decisions based on whatever model they feel is right. I believe that the town of Nantucket Select Board even officially adopted that as the model that they are, that they've officially adopted. So if I'm wrong there, someone will correct me, but that's my understanding of how the wording is created in the regulatory update. And just quickly, not in response to this, but in response to the past commenter, it is important that I clarify some falsehoods for the record. If you go to
Mr. Daly's comments?
Yes.
Okay.
If you go to the posted packet on the town's website, there's 2 versions of the updated regulations. One says final draft clean version, no buffer zone change 2/20/2024. One says final draft clean version staff buffer zone change 2/20/24. And with respect, they have different words and they even have a different number of pages in them. So I don't understand an assumption that Mr. Daly read both and they're the same, because they're absolutely not the same. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cohane, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Amy Cohane. My husband and I live at 76 Union Street, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. I will probably be less than 1 minute. I want to express my appreciation for all the work that has been done for updating the regulations, and I didn't have any problem seeing between the different versions and was able to download them and actually search for different keywords. And so I saw the differences. I'm supportive, and I'm extremely supportive of the expansion of the buffer zones. So I just wanted to have that on record. I also wanted to, submitted 2 videos and I got permission to share a video. And I really appreciated Mr. Daly's use of the words, engineer our way out of this. This is an example of engineering a way out of putting a pool in a flood zone by creating this not immaterial structure to create an above ground pool. So this is 11 seconds. There's a ton of groundwater here. And I just really feel like it was important to emphasize that this notion of above ground pools still being allowed in, or not, I believe there should be explicit language about above ground pools and in ground pools not being allowed in flood zones in the new regulations. I think it's important because this is a really significant in-ground structure that is impermeable. And if you look at all this groundwater, and I submitted another video, I won't share it here, of all the flooding that we've had at Mariner Way in recent floodings. I just really hope that it's considered that above ground pools is not a way to engineer our way out of, saving a pool in a very precious ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. RJ Turcotte?
Thank you, Chair Golding. On behalf of the Nantucket Land and Water Council, RJ Turcotte. First, I'd just like to agree with Ms. Barnacle. I remember back when we were discussing the modeling that the CRP used a couple years back, maybe 2022. That MCFRM model was like, we all thought that was the best thing since sliced bread coming out. And pretty recently, it's come to light that there are a lot of bugs and a lot of issues with it. We're hearing that from our own consultants and engineers, and I would agree with Ms. Barnacle on that point that it should be, I mean, right now, ideally you're using the NOAA 2022 model, but they're going to get updated regularly, and that one specifically should be more vague. In fact, in the CRP, it might have been best to make it a little more vague, but hindsight's 2020. And then the second point, really, this has been going on for years, and I'd just like to point out to everyone here that this is a living document and that this isn't going to be set in concrete. This is not, these regulations are going to be continually updated from now until the end of time, and that our recommendation to staff and the chair and the vice chair to set a meeting on a date certain where everyone can submit anything else they would like to have input on. You review it that evening thoroughly, even if it takes all night. And Ms. Beal has to bring every single one of you a bowl of ice cream, because you'll have earned it. And then you set a following meeting to vote on it. Otherwise, we're going to go on and on and on and on and on and on forever. So you have the power to do that. You have the power to do that very publicly, set this up and discuss it and then get it done. And that's what NLWC would recommend. Thank you.
Well, thank you, RJ. You won't get any argument from me, and but I think from the sense of the commission, perhaps we can try and take into account some of the issues that have been brought up to our final version and be prepared to vote on it at a meeting on. Let me see. Jeff, does April the 4th sound doable or too soon?
I mean, that is our next regular meeting. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that was brought up this evening. How about, why don't we'll I would feel better given all of the suggestions tonight, maybe the 25th of April, which is the meeting after that. We have a little break because there's school break in there, to get all of the comments and questions and corrections cleared up this evening from this evening.
Okay, well, commissioners, do you feel that that is, we make that as the date when we actually decide to vote?
Works for me.
And thank you, Linda.
Works for
Thank
me.
you, Mark. Thank you, Mike. And Frank, please keep it totally brief if you need to say anything.
I'm going to do my best. It's against my nature.
Okay, well, you can present in writing again. And we want to wrap this up. We've got a lot more to do. We haven't even started on our agenda this evening. Is there anything you have to say now that you can't put down on paper?
Very briefly, yes. Only because I had a commissioner say my name. So since we talked about
Okay,
ad hominem,
go ahead, but please.
Commissioner brought my name up, so I feel like I should be able to respond. I did take a video.
Yeah.
Click the links. Click both links. They go to the same place, same language.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know if it was,
I just want to underscore that because it's
Okay.
it's pertinent.
I wonder
It's-
if it was one of the supplemental documents that's on there.
Thanks, Dan. We'll ask staff to absolutely triple check.
well, I'm just saying it's germane to my previous point, which is there's a lot of confusion around it. So
Right.
that's the reason I bring it up.
Okay,
I'm
we will
not sure where
absolutely,
you got that from.
we will make a point of trying to iron out any.
There's a bunch of, on the website, there's a bunch of documents.
Right.
Um,
This is for the minute taker. That's Dan Malloy making comments, and Jeff has raised his hand, and then I'm going to suggest that we move on. And so Jeff, what do you
If I
have
may
to
really
say?
quickly, I think hearing the comments tonight, we will try our best between Will and I, maybe for each one of those versions at the very, very front, we will put a condensed version of the change summary attached to each of those that won't be part of what's the adopted version. So when people open it, they will know what the changes in that document are from the original.
Well, I'm sure that would be a help. And
And again, if people are confused or have questions, please feel free to reach out to our office and we can get people the information that they're looking for, hopefully.
okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody, for your comments on what is obviously a very important subject going forward for the future of the island. And so that brings us on to notices of intent. And the first notice of intent is Lampoon Nominee Trust, 6 Westco Place, Art Gasparo. Good evening, Art.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here before you tonight for this continuation of the public hearing. Also with me is Attorney Glenn Wood, Brian Madden, and Rachel Freeman of the Land Bank. And we filed a revised plan for your review based on some of the comments and concerns in the previous hearing. And what we've done, just to run through the changes quickly, is to adjust the proposed driveway further away from the wetland, such that we held. There's an existing gravel driveway that's there that comes in, and so we've held the edge of that gravel driveway so that we didn't get any closer to the wetland there. And then starting at where you can see the fence in the magenta color, we would remove the gravel and just use 2 cobble strips with grass in between, as we've discussed at previous hearings. And we've added a small depression swale along the edge of that driveway, and then clarified the fairly significant restoration area, which is the area shown with the green crosses in the buffer zone. so that we would restore that with native species. The structure would continue to be relocated to the north, further away from the wetland from what exists from 20.5 to 22.9. We removed the split rail fence that was on the north side of the driveway that there had been some discussion about. And I think that pretty much covers the changes. I know Rachel would like to have a few minutes to also present to the commission. But we believe that with these changes, we have addressed the concerns that we heard, and believe that the project will not have an adverse impact on the protected interests. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Art. Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to briefly clarify the history and current activities on this site. The land bank has longstanding easement rights to access the lily pond through this property, and we're currently in the process of a larger scale planning process, or a larger scale plan for the lily pond. The first of a series of public information sessions is being held on March 28th at the Unitarian Church. And we're going to be following this with an online information session for abutters in April and a public site walk in June. The land bank wants to make it clear that we have no present plans to put in a parking area with access through this easement. If a request for a parking area were ever to be initiated, it would be for a few spaces for ADA compliance only, and would require a new notice of intent that would come before this commission. And I think I'm happy to answer any questions. And as Art said, I think we are in a great place with this application. Thank you.
Brian, I think if we could, did you want to, we had Brian review the project as well and help us in sort of formulating that, the overall approach.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Art. For the record, Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants. So I just want to highlight a few other benefits to the project as Art discussed: relocating, maximizing the setback for the barn, shifting the driveway further to the south, allowing for that stormwater management swale to provide some water quality treatment, pollutant removal, flood control, to enhance wetland interests associated with that small IVW that I had flagged out there. But something that we also haven't really discussed at any significant length is the restoration area that is being proposed out here. 625 square feet within the 25-foot is proposed to be revegetated. Under existing conditions, that area is occupied by mulch, landscape type bed. There's a stone landscape border wall, and the restoration does extend into some of the lawn areas as well. And so what we are proposing to revegetate that area with native shrubs of high bush blueberry, arrowwood, and or sweet pepper bush, and monitor those as necessary. That will significantly improve conditions to the IVW, in addition to the other benefits. And as I outlined in my letter, I feel that the project meets the standards for the long-term net benefit standards for the waiver. And I'll turn it over to questions or others.
Thank you. Yes, Linda.
I don't want to break in on the presentation, but I think I know that they're the neighbors. I was one of the ones that had the biggest problem with this project as it's been moving along. And I am satisfied that everything's been done. So I'm happy with what they've all agreed to. So I withdraw my objections to it.
That's interesting because, in fact, Linda, the more I thought about your reservations, the more I felt they had a certain substance, and that it was reasonable to ask them to move it to outside as far away as possible and closer to the house. So That's interesting.
Well, I think the reason the access, I believe, is a little bit straighter in. I think they're following the access that they've already had, and they're removing the gravel and doing a few other things that I think mitigate it. And they're taking a parking area, not having one. I think I can, and they've straightened the building out. So it's as far away as it can get. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with it now than I was before when everything was a totally different site plan.
Thank you, Linda. Any further comments from commissioners? Yes, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all to those who presented. I am comfortable with the project as it has been amended. I think I want to reiterate my point because it's been a few months now that in terms of access to the Lily Ponds, I understand that the land bank has that historic access and needs that access. My points have never been that we should constrain that. We should constrain unauthorized use that is not by land bank officials. And I think we can certainly do that in the orders of condition by, having fences be required and having the access specifically delineated only for land bank vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman Golding. I too appreciate the changes that have made and the improvements in the application. We were concerned about the shed, and now I pushed hard to have it be squared away to the line to reduce the incursion in the 25-foot setback, which they have done. I appreciate that. I was coming around as you were, Ian, to Linda's original suggestion of moving the barn across the right-of-way. But they seem to have a decent application now, and I guess there's support for it as presented. And I think I too agree with Seth on the option of us in the order of conditions writing in some sort of fencing along the right of way on the land bank property line that restricts any kind of vehicular access, both planned by land bank and unplanned by visitors who may not get the picture that that's not a road. So we can put up a split rail fence there with a easy access for pedestrian traffic if we can write that in the order. But those are my thoughts. Thank you, Chairman Golding.
Thank you, Mark. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also was one commissioner who made early on comment about the building being moved out of the 25 alongside the house, which I think was the appropriate discussion to have. But all in all, I'm glad that everybody came together and that Rachel spoke on the land bank's position, and Glenn Woods had a lot to say about it too, as well as Hunter participating in the process. So I'm prepared to vote favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any further comments from commissioners? Seeing none, is that Mr. and Mrs. Hagedorn? Would you like to identify yourselves and comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Jim and Carly Hagedorn from 3 Wesco Place. We feel pretty good about where this is. We met with Neil Patterson and Jesse Bell last weekend, and I spoke again to Rachel and Neil again this morning. And based on how they presented it, Carly and I are both supportive of this application. We thank the land bank for listening and modifying their plans.
Thank you, sir. So, Rachel, would you like to close?
Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry. Just wait till you get my age. Art, would you like to close?
I think that Attorney Wood is with us and was trying to be recognized, but he's in the attendee list.
Well,
Just promoted him to panelist.
Okay, thank
far
you.
for me to stand in Attorney Wood's way. I would be risking I don't know what. So Glenn, do you want to speak? Glenn, can you unmute?
Silent lawyer.
Here we go. Okay.
That's right, Mark. Sometimes I am. Thank you, everyone. Glenn Wood, Rubner Rubman for the Land Bank. We're happy with the general support, although we are entirely not comfortable and cannot agree to the prohibition that's suggested by Seth, that it be limited to land bank vehicles. As Rachel has pointed out, the land bank has a long public easement. And we've expressly stated that the purpose, even though the master plan is at 75% right now, there could be a small limited ADA parking area. And so a limitation presently in the order of conditions is both unacceptable and legally not possible. This commission has no legal jurisdiction to limit real estate rights of a property owner, especially in this case where we don't have any proposed specific use. One, we're already on record stating that any public use by vehicles would be nominal. And our environmental expert has opined that the project as proposed will have no adverse effect on the adjacent small isolated wetland, given the fact that we've moved it further away to the south. We've added an infiltration trench, and we've also proposed to revegetate the entire area that's been lawn right up to the wetland for many, many years. So we're prepared to close, but I'm making it utterly clear that if the commission votes to include a condition that limits public access in any way, it will have to be appealed to DEP in Superior Court. This is entirely unacceptable and completely illegal and outside of your bounds of jurisdiction. So please don't go there.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the applicant related to the history of the easement. Is the easement currently for pedestrian access, or is it an easement for vehicular access?
I'll speak to that. It's entirely broad and includes all public access. It's not limited in any way, Seth, whatsoever. And we cannot agree to any limitations that you're suggesting here. That's way out of your jurisdiction.
Well, thank you, Glenn, for being emphatic on your legal opinion. And
Need to be here because this is
I understand.
way
Thank you.
way out of
Thank you.
sorts.
Thank you. Let's keep everything moderate, shall we? Yes, Seth, do you wish to reply?
Yes, and I hear Mr. Wood's comments. I won't speak to the legal piece of it. It's not my field of expertise, but it's clear that vehicular traffic over this easement does cause impacts to the wetland. It causes compaction to the soil. It causes potential erosion and sedimentation of the soil towards the wetland. So it is certainly within our permitting authority here to take steps to minimize those adverse impacts. Perhaps those steps need to be different than the steps currently proposed. They could include measures to minimize those impacts, or they could include measures to reduce the frequency of those impacts, which is what I'd propose in terms of the fencing and the types of use. But I'm not necessarily tied to those specific conditions. My goal here is that we reduce the impact of vehicle traffic on the wetland. And I think that as a commission and as a staff, we will come up with perfectly legally tenable conditions that support that performance standard and that protected interest, even if they're different than the ones I originally proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman Golding. I understand Attorney Wood's comments, but we've allowed them to construct a road through the wetland. They're within the inside the 25-foot zone. I think we should maybe change our mind on the road construction and make them put in a simple walking path. No stones on each side, which allow for heavy equipment, and to make it a walking path. We have that right because they're operating in under our jurisdiction, and a road to me would be not in the best interest if they're planning to use it as a road, as Glenwood implied. So that would be my thought: is let's build a walking path.
Thank you, Mark. And Mr. Wood, unless you have something further to add, please, no more verbal fist pounding. We've taken your point of view into account.
I do have one comment, Ian.
Please go ahead.
I would just point out that Seth's comments about use are entirely speculative. This has been used and has been used and is presently continuing to be used by land bank vehicles. And there's no evidence of any impacts whatsoever on this adjacent wetland. It's not in a wetland. It's adjacent to a wetland. Our expert has opined that the project as proposed with the additional mitigation will have no adverse impact on the wetland. So the suggestion that there is an impact or that there would be an impact is entirely speculative and not appropriate. And therefore, the intensity of use, which we're indicating is going to be nominal, if any greater than presently exists now, is inappropriate. Further, the fencing is just, that would adversely impact the existing easement, and a conservation commission does not have rights to control real estate rights. There's tons of case law on this. So again, I would respectfully encourage the commission to not go down this route, because if such language is added, it will force us to appeal, which DEP will throw out in 3 seconds.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Thank you. And Linda, before I recognize you, would you mind if I recognize Dan Bailey?
No, another attorney.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dan, fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Linda. The only thing I want to mention is, I want to counter Glenn's position a little bit about the clarity of the easement. This case was brought regarding the scope of the easement. Yes, he's right. It certainly allows vehicular access, allows pedestrian access, but the exact scope of that, and those sorts of things were what we were fighting about. Now we've reached agreement about the scope of that easement, and it will allow public access, pedestrian access, vehicular access. But I just wanted to go on the record on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Linda, thank you for holding fire for a few minutes. What would you like to say?
I just think they have public rights as far as their deeds are concerned, and they shouldn't really have to give them away. I think it's about what the argument about is right now is preservation of public rights, which they cannot get rid of when they got the land. I think the land bank's going to own it forever, and it's my understanding from their presentation, they have no intention of putting parking there. And if they're going to put park there, whether it's for ADA compliance, which they don't need, if they don't allow any parking there, there is no violation of the ADA, arguably. But if they have to put parking in, I would assume they have to come back to the Concom for an NOI. So I think we could always deny it at that point. So I think we should just go ahead and move along here.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So, Mr. Hagedorn?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just know what Neil and Jesse told us both last weekend and this morning, was that there was no plan for a parking lot, that they agreed that they would go back for a new notice of intent if they wanted parking in there. And I'm wondering, sir, if that's still the position of the land bank, is that no parking lot without going back for another public hearing and an NOI.
Thank you. Rachel, would you like to reply? Or like to emphasize what you said before?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That is entirely true. I completely support Mr. Hagedorn's statement. We have no intention at this time of putting in parking, and that is where it stands. If we do end up finding a need for a ADA compliance parking spaces, we will be coming back with a new notice of intent. And Linda, can I just add one additional thing? Linda is correct. We do have ADA parking in the other parking area. But we've been meeting with the Commission on Disability. And again, there is no intention at this time to be parking in this area.
Thank you, Rachel. Mr. Ziesing, you had your hand up and now you've taken it down.
Thank you, commissioners. I was just waiting for Dan to get on. He was having trouble getting on. Thank you.
He has an additional comment to make.
I do not.
Okay. Yes, Seth.
Thank you. So this is probably a question for staff or potentially for town council, but in similar projects, or maybe not similar, but in other projects where there's been some public easement or proprietor's road or right of way, we've had orders of conditions that required those accesses to be blocked by fencing when not in use. None of those were ever appealed. And it's because there was a clear finding made that having those open to general vehicular traffic can cause impacts to the wetland resource areas that are protected by the WPA and our regulations. So I think we should request an opinion on that, please. And then with respect to Mr. Wood about my comments being speculative, it's the burden of the applicant to prove that their assumptions are correct. And it's the burden of the commission to condition orders to minimize adverse impacts. And if we as a commission believe that there are adverse impacts related to vehicle traffic, it's imperative, it's our duty to commission that use in the orders of conditions. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Mr. Ziesing, I see your hand up again. And I think.
Sorry, I was just unmuting. Yeah, I was just thinking if obviously the area is potentially open for another NOI. And if maybe it's for a call with land bank, if you don't impose it, to have some type of a fence and gate for people to walk through. We enjoy the people, but when we first moved in, we had a lot of cars coming down our driveway and driving out and even doing donuts on the lily pond. And it's also a safety issue for people out there. It happened numerous times. People come bombing down Wesco. So we finally put up a fence with removable rails. We would love to see that if possible, provided it doesn't upset our agreement with Land Bank. And if such time that they ever go back and have a parking area approved, obviously it would be taken down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziesing. I'm a little puzzled because we owned a property at the other end of Lily Street, 74 Gardner, which is on the corner. I would walk that. I've been walking that for decades, and I never saw any donuts. So, I'm flabbergasted that anybody would do that. So, anyway, that's an aside. So, Art, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening intently, and I think there's a solution here. And that is that instead of going to an all-out prohibition or trying to have to enforce or restrict that it is only land bank vehicles, the suggestion that there be a fence or a gate might be the meet in the middle at the property line that addresses Mr. Ziesing's concern that he just had. Will de facto limit the amount of vehicle trips and traffic through there, I think, which then I believe would address Mr. Engelborg's concern with an abundance of traffic, perhaps, having some kind of an adverse impact. And I also think that if you look at the overall project as proposed, we've been taking bits and pieces of this, but from the existing condition with a driveway that's used on a regular basis. Now, again, it doesn't continue all the way. Well, let me back up. The land bank does use it already to get into this property. So that's going to be a continued use and a use that's already continuing without impact. But in fact, that we're not getting any closer, that we have the restoration area, that the structure is getting further away from what exists. I think when we look at this in aggregate, and in terms of the protected interests, that it really does represent an overall net benefit and that the protection's in place. And I think that agreeing based upon this discussion to the gate at the property line essentially would hopefully address Mr. Engelborg's concern, and maybe we could, find a way forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. And so how would you guarantee pedestrian access by having an
opening
side?
Yeah, if I may, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I presume that, you could have a gate. The land bank will have to figure this out exactly, but you probably just have two posts that are only like 4 feet apart, and maybe your gate's only, 6 feet or something of that nature. Or I'm sure they could just leave an opening, that would allow for that.
Right. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everybody. I'm a bit confused because it seems like representatives from the applicant are saying different things, but in relation to Mr. Gasparo's points, I totally agree with that type of suggestion, having the gate. I'm not sure Mr. Wood agrees with that. It seems like he said any type of closure on that easement would cause a threat of appeal, but if there's a gate that has a lock that only the land bank has access to, it's the same thing as putting a prohibition into the order of conditions. So, thank you.
So, Seth, are you suggesting that would be part of our orders of conditions?
Yeah, I think we could say that there's a lock gate and in the order of conditions. Yeah.
Okay. Dan, before you comment, Will has a comment, if you'd allow me to defer to staff here. And I noticed that Linda also has her hand up. Will, what?
Just real quick, I'm always kind of updating conditions as things are going. I'm wondering if this would be somewhat of a compromise that could work for everybody. A condition that states the terminus of the vehicle access way shall be blocked by split rail fence or gate with an opening for pedestrian access. If a parking area is approved on adjacent property, this barrier could be removed so that it's not a permanent situation.
Well, I'm not sure that I mean, speaking for myself, it seems that Seth had asked for a legal opinion about that. I don't know if he continues to wish to have a legal opinion. And I think that's something we'll probably discuss when we have the orders of conditions before us. But thank you for bringing that up. And Linda, I see your hand up.
I think putting a gate with a lock on it is going to be a problem. I don't know if Attorney Wood is still, yeah, there he is. I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of, they're gonna have to go to the HDC either way because split rail fences are not allowed in the OHD without a permit, only outside the OHD. I don't think they're gonna have a problem with it. But I think just a split rail fence right where the demarcation is, where the land bank property starts with an opening. There are several areas on Nantucket where that is the case, where it is an old split rail fence with an opening for pedestrian access. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a locked gate, which I don't think the HDC is going to approve, and I think that's probably going to be in violation of the public access issue. So, and I don't see the point with a locked gate. So
Well,
I'm not in favor of that part of it. So I'm willing to vote for this, but not with a locked gate.
Thank you, Linda. Let's have that for the orders of conditions, but I have to say that in the cranberry bogs, the conservation has the foundation has had locked gates for decades, and I happen to be one of the lucky key holders. So, but there we have it. Dan, Mr. Bailey, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Art, can you put up the plan? I just want to be clear about where we're talking about this fence. You know, what I don't want to have happen is some misunderstanding in a condition that we then have to try and unravel. So it would be on the east, yes, exactly, right there on the property line. And the reason I'm just raising that, I didn't want it to be on the west side because the only way for Hunter to get into his property is, you know, over that roadway. If there was a gate there, obviously that would create problems for him. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any? Yes, Mr. Zizing.
Thank you. Just want to throw in, I agree with Linda. You know, post and rail fence with an opening is really sufficient. It's very easy to take the rails down for land bank to get in and out of. When it was there before, nobody took them down. You all can decide on a locked gate, but I'll do my best to work with land bank on whatever is suitable. But I like Linda's idea. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think Mike just pipped you to the post. Seth, Mike, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be really quick. I like the idea of the post and rail fence without the lock. I think it just goes against public access to have the lock on there, and it just doesn't seem feasible to me that somebody's going to bound through there with their car and knock a locked gate over. So I'm going to be against the lock. Thank you.
Seth?
All right. I don't really care if it's a lock gate or a split rail fence that's into the ground or it's a split rail fence that's in PVC sleeves that is getting picked up. My point is that I'm making these comments based on what the applicants were offering. My point is that there needs to be some type of physical demarcation at the eastern terminus of this easement on the property line to prevent excessive vehicle traffic to and from the adjacent property that could cause impacts to the wetland that's on the site that we are protecting. So it doesn't matter what type, just it matters that it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Okay. Linda, anything you
So
have
real quick,
before?
real quick comment. They keeps using the word post and rail. Post and rails are not allowed on Nantucket except in a horse trough. they are split rails. So if it's going in the order of conditions and the HCC is going to have to deal with it, split rail is what we're after, not a post and rail. And I think there's a disconnect between where Mike and I think the fence is going, which is on the property line of the land bank property, as opposed to what Seth is suggesting is that there be a fence out on Wesco coming into the property. Is that my understanding between my understanding and Seth? What he's saying?
No, we're
No, I don't think
the
so.
location being the same.
No, Linda, do you want the plot plan up on the
No,
screen
it was
again?
it's where they showed it. That's where I was talking about. I just thought that Seth wanted to keep him from coming in the driveway, period.
No.
Okay.
Okay. So, Art,
That's all, Mr. Chair. I think you're there. I think everyone's saying the same thing in just different ways, and that there's
Okay.
an understanding of what needs to happen here, and that
okay,
you know, that if you would like a condition that maybe helps this, we could provide a revised plan subject to staff, you know, hopefully close tonight.
Right.
But for the record, a revised plan that shows, why don't we just leave it as gate with opening, and then the exact, you know, mechanism of the exact design of that, and
okay,
even joke about, anyway, you know, could be left to whatever other approvals are needed, if that works. And in that, and to be clear, the position is, as Mr. Engelbert said, on the eastern terminus, or to be clear, the common boundary between the land bank's property and the Lampoon property.
thank you, Art. And Seth, you're happy with that? We don't need a legal opinion at this point?
No, I'm happy with that, and I would say it sounds like the applicant wishes to close tonight, but
Yes,
if
please.
they want to not close tonight and submit an updated plan that has that gate on it, then we wouldn't need the probably condition at all because it's on the plan. So either we have an updated plan with that gate, or we have a condition that requires that gate. Either way is fine by me. Thank you.
Art, your call.
We're fine to close.
Okay. So, Will, we have everything to close? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So on that note, a motion to close?
Motion to close, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mike pipped you to the post, but I'll give you the second. Okay, by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So that brings us on to Montana 49 Nominee Trust, 49 Walwinet Road. David Haynes, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Now that everybody has worn you out, I'm going to throw you an easy one, I hope.
Good man. Good man.
We're asking for permission to put in solar panels out at 49 Walwinet Road in an area right off the, sort of off the edge of the lawn. You see that triangular shape. We've changed the shape of the things to stay outside of 50. No waivers are required. We're going down to about 37.5 feet in there, with a clearing area just around the edge. The area is wooded with shrubs. There's been some trees that were cut for firewood in that area, and the panels will be mounted on helical piers or whatever they were called earlier. But basically, we will have to remove the stumps to prevent future growing, and we're going to seed it with a wildlife conservation mix, and with annual mowing to keep the wooded vegetation down. Structures are outside of 50, 25 is maintained, and basically we're maintaining a 37.5 foot off the edge. No regrading. Utility line will have to come over through the lawn area and over to the house to connect the wires to the panel. we do have, we did have to have it reviewed by Natural Heritage. It was reviewed. We did get a letter back saying that there were no issues under the Wetlands Protection Act, but they are requiring a botanical survey for a species. And so I would like to not close tonight in case we have anything that requires any kind of a redesign, and I don't have to come back to you for a minor mon or an amendment. So basically that's the project. We don't want to close tonight because of that. It is a species that we can identify hopefully in the next 2 weeks when we're out there. It is identifiable in the winter. So we should be able to make a quick assessment of what we have and if we have anything. Personally, I don't think there will be anything. There might be, but we'll find out when we look closer. With that, if anybody has any questions.
Joe.
Yes, I'm a supporter of solar and have had solar on the roof for 5 years. The ground mounted solars are what I consider an eyesore, frankly. It may be okay according to the regulations, but not according to what you see when it finally gets installed. And the other point I'd raise is in terms of the trimming of the trees around the ground mounted solar system is going to be a continual project as those trees continue to grow and you see the low sun angle during the winter time. Other than that, I don't have any other comments.
Well, Joe, I'm not sure that your preference for roof mounted is, I think, beyond our purview. And
yes, it is.
David, I can see you're not wearing a solar tie there, David, anyway.
Yeah, but the sun's coming through the window. If I could, one of the things that Mr. Young wants to do is put this up in a wedge. He doesn't want to really look at it either. It won't be able to be seen from the road. It's in back of his house and off the edge of his lawn in a wooded area. And we're clearing another 12.5 feet off to either side. The location faces south, so it'll have pretty good solar efficiency. I feel with minimal clearing and maintaining of the trees. It's a wedge shape, so it's more open on the south and closer on the north. And I mean, I see people put the roof mounted panels on the east and west sides of the houses, and they're efficient enough that they're getting they're working. So not having full sun, I agree with you. I would prefer to have full sun with no obstacles in the way. But Mr. Young definitely wanted to keep it out of not be an eyesore for himself and for other people. So we've dealt with that. I appreciate your comments, Jim.
We agree.
Thank you, David. You could say that Robert's protecting his wetland scenic views.
Right.
Exactly. So, Linda?
If it just gives Joe any comfort, when the HDC approves these things, and they do prefer under their guidelines to have them ground mounted, they require that they are not visible from a traveled way, period.
Right.
If they are visible from a traveled way, they either got to move them, take them out, or they got to put screening in. So at the time of inspection, if they can see them, they have to screen them. So they're not going to be visible. I've seen plenty that are ugly on the ground, and I don't like the ground mounts. But in this case, I think the HCC is going to do their thing.
Thank you, Linda. As it happens, I'd like to see them on every single roof on the island. And the existential threat from climate change is here to stay, in part because there are so few of them. So we'll agree to disagree. And there we have it. So, David, you want to continue until April the 4th?
Yes, please. I appreciate it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. And you're up again for Woodbury Lane Association, rear Woodbury Lane?
Yes, I am. This is an application, actually, we put forth an application and it was implemented in 2012. And it's basically the same application with a minor change that I wanted to bring up to the commission. It's an area of Phragmites. This area, this is one of the first projects I worked on in Nantucket in, I think, '83. And a portion of this wetland back here, a portion of it was excavated out to be used as not the wetland, but a portion of the upland, a portion of this area, this lot, was used for a detention basin. It was the outflow from this area was controlled to control the rate of runoff. Anyway, but that area, it's parts of it. The northern part is more cattails, but it progresses into Phragmites as it gets a little drier coming to the south. And that approximate area of the Phragmites has been treated in the past. It was treated for about 3 years, from 12 to 15, but with herbicide using glyphosate applications. We'd like to do it again. The way we're proposing to do it is the first year go in, cut off the seed heads. What we previously got approved was the standard technique, which is the cut and drip method, which was going in, cutting, and immediately dripping it on. What we'd like to modify that a little bit. I know the commission has approved the cut and drip quite regularly, but what we would like to do to make it easier and much more effective, and I did go over this with Will, who is a licensed herbicide applicator, was to go in with a hand wand or a weed wand and actually cut off the seed heads, and then apply the herbicide as a basal. He had the terminology, and I put it in the literature, but to basically wipe it up the stems of the Phragmites. But first, cut off the seed heads, bag them, and dispose them in the digester. It makes it go much faster, much easier, much more effective. With no, we're not talking about a foliar treatment or a spray treatment, like that, but just they used to call this the bloody glove, which was you had a bag, an intravenous bag that came down to, you put on a plastic glove and a cotton glove, and you had a tube coming into a wad in your hand, and you had it wet, and you just run it up and down each one of the Phragmites. Well, now they've modified that to they've got a wand that basically a little sponge on the end that's got it on it, and it applies it to the Phragmites. But again, and then what we would do after that is repeat the application in a few weeks. This would all be done because it's glyphosate. It has to have migration of the sap back down into the root system to kill the root system. So that would have to be done basically after August 1st. And then we would do another application a couple of weeks later if on anything that was still going. And in the winter time, or in the late fall or early winter, we'd come down and cut all the reeds and dispose of them in the digester. And then in the following growing season, we would repeat this process. But I think it would find it much more effective than snipping off and dripping in with a bottle. And it's much more effective because you have a lot more surface area. A lot more application of the herbicide getting to the roots versus a few drops down the stem. But I think it's a good process. It's perfectly safe. Would all be supervised by a licensed herbicide applicator. And if you have any question, oh yeah, the one other thing I found out. Being an old dog, I didn't learn the new tricks. I didn't realize that we needed to file a checklist for an ecological restoration project. We have asked for a waiver because it is work within a wetland, Will and I went back and forth on the language, whether it was necessary or not. So we've asked for it as an overall net improvement. But we all also submitted the checklist, which documents what I've just spoken about. But if you have any questions or would like to discuss this further, I'd like to see what you think.
Thank you, David. Commissioners, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, David. I don't see any concern with the basal wipe technique that is being proposed. We've, approved that. We've approved foliar spraying. We've approved clip and drip. We've approved many different methods on island for Phragmites in past permits. I'm going to speak at my own peril here, but because it's not our role to tell applicants what to do, but I'm going to gently say that, each area and each species responds a little bit differently. So you might try the basal wipe and it might not work, and you might move towards wanting to do the clip and drip, or you might try the glyphosate and it might not work as well as in this site as something else like clear cast, which has been used a lot on island for Phragmites. So I know that's not how the permit was written, but I would say that in general, it's better to have more options available for invasive species management rather than applicants being tied into one specific thing. But this is not what they applied for. I guess we will just hear what they applied for. I will make a comment on the waiver, because I don't think the long-term net benefit waiver is needed, because we have a special waiver that deals with invasive species management in particular. And I think the wording of that waiver requires us to issue it. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. David?
Yes, I appreciate that. What I specified in the notice of intent was either glyphosate as being rodeo, obviously, or any approved equivalent. So I did not, whatever you guys, if you wanted to write in there that we could, with either staff approval or with it come back to the commission if something didn't work, we could modify it. We could do it as a minor mod, or it could be written into the order that we were allowed to have some flexibility in that, and I do appreciate that. But yes, thank you very much. Oh, I also forgot to mention that there will be some replanting done of shrubs and things like that to improve the vegetative community out there. Thank you for your comments, Seth.
Thank you, David. Any other comments or input from members of the public? So David, are you going to need to continue? Do you have I noticed there's not a full file number on this.
Yes, there is.
There is? Okay.
We did receive them.
Okay. Yes, Seth.
And this has been posted in environmental monitor and gone through the review period?
Well, not quite.
So with respect, I think we should wait until that happens to close the hearing.
And then we should probably wait. We should probably wait until your meeting on the 25th. I just found out about it. I got it in there. It's going to be in the monitor, whatever. I appreciate that. I was going to start off with that as a comment and whatever.
Oh,
it's not on until after it comes out of the monitor, but it's been submitted. It hasn't been come up yet. So if we go till the 25th of April, that will give the 14 days that is required.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Seth, for bringing that up. Joe, do you have anything to say?
When the 25th was mentioned, I thought it was going to be the 25th of March. But talking about the 25th of April, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. David, see you then. Or,
Thank you very much. I'm
or
going.
before then, perhaps, but yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Will.
Thank you.
Will, you're muted. Are you there?
Sorry. There was one raised hand, Marcia Fader. I don't know if that was on purpose or not.
Marcia,
Yes, it was on purpose. Thank you.
I apologize. I didn't see it. Please identify yourself and go ahead.
Yes, my name is Marcia Fader. I'm at 36 Liberty Street. And I just have really a couple of questions. I had submitted a letter listing those questions. And really, it's not that I'm opposed to the removal of the Phragmites. I wanted to understand more fully the impact in the neighborhood. Specifically, you know, and again, of course, I'm not an expert, but I would understand that when one removes the root system of a Phragmite collection, that you naturally, you know, that drinks up the water of the retention basin. And to me, I kind of think that it may cause more water accumulation in the retention basin. And I wonder what its impact is in the general area and for neighbors, and what the drainage is, because it would seem to me to benefit from some sort of dredging so that the retention basin could retain a greater amount of water caused by the removal of the Phragmites. So that was one of the questions, really, the major question. And knowing that in that area of open land where there's a deer habitat, and that I assume that what David worked on years ago with Woodbury Lane was designed to work with and coordinate with the lily pond as it moves from a higher to a lower elevation. And it just seemed like an appropriate time to review how that drainage system is working, especially since the Lily Pond project is getting underway. So that's really my question, is really understanding the impact of that whole area of wetland of which I am a part of.
Thank you, Marcia. Seth, do you want to address the invasive issue, or David, do you want to make a comment at all?
I'm happy to quickly address both issues, and
Okay.
then sure
Yeah.
David will as well. I'll take what I think is the easier comment first. So in terms of the deer habitat, you know, restoring native species, which is proposed by this application to plant native wetland species, will actually improve habitat for those deer. There obviously may be temporary disturbances to them during the construction period, but in the long term, wildlife is a protected interest of our regulations, and wildlife will be benefited by this project. And in terms of the hydrology question you raise, you are right that Phragmites roots do soak up water, and over time, actually, Phragmites can turn wet areas into less wet areas. But again, the reason that native shrubs are being proposed here is to offset the loss of that Phragmites and to provide the same amount of infiltration capacity, or I guess absorption capacity, by those new shrubs for that water. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. David?
Yes, thank you, Seth. Great explanation. Yeah, the shrubs will replace the evapotranspiration of the Phragmites that are being removed. Also, we're planning on, I forgot to mention it, we're going to seed the area with a New England wetland seed mix. So there will be an herbaceous layer, there will be a grass layer back in there, and also a shrub layer. You get more evapotranspiration off of a wooded swamp than you do off of an open body of water. So I think that it will not increase the amount of water because of the replanting that we're going to do and also with the seeding. But thank you.
Thank you, David. And Marcia, sadly, deer don't like Phragmites, otherwise we wouldn't perhaps have this issue to begin with. So, Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one comment for Mrs. Vader's benefit. If they're not going to be pulling any Phragmites out here, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but you know, with the herbicide, they're just going to be, it's going to kill it down, and some other species will thrive with the new light in there as well. So I wasn't sure if you were worried about them pulling Phragmites out there and spreading it other areas, but that wouldn't be the case. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I really wasn't worried about that as much as really understanding, because the new plantings are not in well, they're bordering the retention basin, correct? It's not really in the basin itself, but it'll take a while to take hold, to make the change. But I assume, David is monitoring the success and its relationship to the whole neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you. So, all right. So that's continued until the 25th. And that moves us on to New England Development, 50 Easton Street, Paul Santos.
Thank you, Paul Santos, surveyors. On behalf of the applicant, White Elephant Hotel LLC, care of New England Development. Property is located at 50 Easton Street, and it is better known as the White Elephant Hotel. This application is a notice of intent for the proposed maintenance and infill of an existing wooden deck and the like-kind replacement of an existing seasonal canopy within land subject to coastal storm flowage and within the 100-foot buffer zone to a coastal bank, which is essentially a bulkhead, and land containing shellfish. An outer wall of the White Elephant will be adjusted to match the existing building line, and the deck areas will be elevated so there'll be no change in impervious areas. The plan that you see before you, the hatched area is the area that we are talking about that is currently existing decking with the seasonal canopy. There is a small circular section on the north side of the plan. That is the section of building that will be adjusted to match the existing building line. What they will be doing is filling the two areas to the east and to the west with an expanded proposed elevated deck, approximately 270 square feet, and I believe 340 square feet. If my math is right, that's approximately 610 square feet of elevated deck that would essentially square off this existing area. There is a compost sock that's shown in there for temporary placement during construction. The 50-foot no-build is shown to the south. The deck itself, I believe, is in excess of approximately 80 feet from the resource area, which is the bulkhead. As mentioned, the site is in the flood zone. It is an AE elevation 7. This site is outside of any mapped priority habitat and estimated habitat areas that are mapped by NHESP. The application itself sets forth a performance standard review with regard to the resource areas. I'll briefly go through those. They are submitted as part of the notice of intent. I won't go through the preambles, but the land subject to coastal storm flowage. Project will not change or increase impervious surfaces on the site and will not diminish the ability of the land to absorb and contain floodwaters or to buffer inland areas from flooding and wave damage. Floodwaters will not be displaced onto adjacent parcels in association with the proposed activities. The landform will not materially be altered. The floodplain will not be increased in elevation or velocity, and there will be no change in superficial drainage or flow characteristics of the floodplain and site. The proposed work will not impact the existing surface materials and not cause ground surface or saltwater pollution triggered by coastal storm flowage. The site is connected to town sewer. And all work will be in compliance with state and local building code regulations for flood hazard areas. With regard to the standards for Coastal Bank, the bulkhead is at 50 Easton Street and provides storm damage prevention and flood control, but do not provide a sediment supply to other resource areas. That's in response to the Coastal Bank Performance Standard 2. Proposed work will not have any adverse effect on wave action or movement of sediment from site, and no work is proposed within the water column and will be set back approximately 85 feet from the top of the coastal bank or bulkhead. The work will not have an adverse effect on the bulkheads, including bank height, bank stability, wildlife habitat, or vegetation. The bulkhead is not considered to be a sediment source. The proposed decks and seasonal canopy would be located approximately 85 feet from the top of the bulkhead with a walkway presently exists. The proposed work is approximately 85 feet from the top of the coastal bank. And as stated previously, all bulkheads are already present on site. The standard is not applicable. That applies to Performance Standard 8. And within land containing shellfish, no work is proposed within the land containing shellfish, and all work is set back approximately 85 feet from this resource area. Standard 3, standard is not applicable. Standard 4, the work is not anticipated to release any pollutants, erosion control. Compost sock is proposed to be installed between the work and the wetland resource areas. In conclusion, the application is for the proposed maintenance and infill of an existing wooden deck and the light kind replacement of an existing seasonal canopy within land subject to coastal storm flowage and within the 100 buffer zone to a coastal bank. The land containing shellfish, the proposed project complies with the applicable regulations of both the Act and the bylaw. The project will not have an adverse effect on flood control, as floodwaters will not be displaced in association with the proposed activities. I do currently have a DEP file number, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Paul. Questions from commissioners? Questions from members of the public? And would you like to close, Paul?
I would like to close. Thank you.
Excellent. And with the DEP file number, we have everything we need to close, Will? Excellent. The motion to close. Thank you, Joe. Seconded by Tim by roll call vote. Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams. Aye.
Aye.
I apologize, Linda.
Well, you can be me anytime you'd like, Ian.
I don't know what got into me.
We're just trying to move it along here.
You're certainly right there. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
That brings us on to Sconset Bluff Preservation Fund, Town of Nantucket scheduling. So
Did we, Mr. Chairman, did we miss 10 Westmore Lane?
yes, we
Did that
did. We did. Thank you. All right.
Paul's
There's
not
a
going
limit to
anywhere.
how I can harry it along. So Goldsmith, 10 Westmore Lane. Paul, you're up again.
Yeah. Thank you. Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the applicant, J. Graham Goldsmith, and the property owner, the Westmore Club LLC. This is a notice of intent application filed under the local bylaw only. The application is for the proposed construction of essentially a single family dwelling or a cottage on the Westmore property. Installation of a driveway, removal of a shed, and construction of an accessory garage, and then maintenance building with associated grading, landscaping, and utility installation within the buffer zone to a certified vernal pool, and an isolated vegetated wetland, or essentially isolated land subject to flooding under the state act. This application came before you previously, back, I believe, in December of 2022. An order of conditions was issued by this commission. The order of conditions was dated on December 6th of 2022. That order was ultimately appealed by a group of neighbors. Dan Bailey acted on behalf of a number of direct abutters to the property and filed an appeal of that application under both the state regulations and also the local bylaw. The premise of that appeal focused on three separate items. One was that although this cottage is used for single family use, it's part of a larger commercial development, and that we should apply or should have applied the mass stormwater standards to the work that was done. There was a question with regard to whether or not abutter notices had to be sent to the entire Westmore Club or the parcel that this was located on. And then also there was a contesting of the opinion of the location of the limits of the vernal pool. Through a number of filings with the state, they ultimately, in December of 2023, issued a superseding determination of applicability for the subject property. Essentially, through calculations performed by our office, through consultation with Brian Madden, who came in specifically with regard to the vernal pool, habitat and limits. And the state basically determined that the land essentially is isolated land subject to flooding and a vernal pool, and that we were not subject to the act with regard to those particular items because none of the work we were proposing was within those particular items, and that this essentially would have to come back to the Conservation Commission under the local bylaw. As part of our ongoing work with Dan Bailey, the abutters, and DEP, we did subsequently file a removal or withdrawal of the order of conditions that this board had issued with the agreement and intent that we would come back before you again once we had settled all the issues with the state and file a new notice of intent. And that's what's brought us here tonight. The site itself is essentially part of the Westmore Club. It's located in the area that was formerly known as the Field of Dreams. It is essentially an area that has 4 clay tennis courts, 1 grass tennis court, and 1 grass croquet court, essentially fully developed. And the area of the proposed cottage occurs within an area that's already cleared, open. It has an open lawn area with an existing vegetative buffer between this developed area and the vernal pool and the isolated land subject to flooding. The site is not mapped with regard to priority habitat and estimated habitat, with the exception of the vernal pool is a certified vernal pool. That vernal pool was certified back some time ago when the property at 96 Cliff Road was developed. Brian Madden and LEC worked on the project at that time and did follow through with the certification procedure with the NHESP. We have submitted with the application performance standard analysis that was done by Brian Madden. Brian is available for questions should they arise. To walk through the plan itself, what you're looking at is the lower croquet court, if you will, in the Field of Dreams. You'll see the proposed cottage, the proposed maintenance, essentially storage area and garage. The area to the east is the certified vernal pool, and which is contained within what is isolated land subject to flooding based on the state's standard calculation. For those of you who have not seen a vernal pool previously, your buffer zones are increased. You have a 50-foot notice and you have a 75-foot no build. Those setbacks are shown on the plan, and they're expected for the proposed work. The area to the east is a fairly large stand of existing mature trees. Those will stay in place with regard, and they will not be touched as part of this application. I've included in the paperwork that was filed the superseding determination of applicability from the DEP. And to get back to one of the issues that was raised at the time that we originally submitted with regard to notice, although the state did not opine on the issue raised with regard to notice to abutters, we did, for this particular application, notice every abutter to the entire Westmore Club property. So not only this parcel, but all the parcels that make up the Westmore Club were noticed as part of this submittal. Subsequent to our being before you previously, the plans were submitted to the planning board. The Westmore Club is what's considered a major commercial development under the town zoning bylaws. And we did receive an approval from the planning board for the project. And subsequent to the state's review of the plans, the town's planning board engineering consultant, Ed Pesci, did also do a review as part of the planning board review of the project. I have a draft copy of the planning board decision, and within that decision, there is a number of conditions that were placed on the property. Some of those actually would somewhat overlap Concom jurisdiction. I'll briefly touch on some of those. There were 11 conditions put on by the planning board. These were made in conjunction with abutter concerns. One of them, just to briefly go through those, that the cottage shall not have any built-in exterior speakers, live music, or any amplified sounds audible at the property line exterior to the Westmore Club. The cottage resident may play music or other sounds of personal enjoyment at a reasonable volume customary for residential use. They specifically talked about the stand of existing vegetation and trees, which are shown on the plan, regarding no removal or providing notice to both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, should there be any reason why any tree within that area would have to be altered for any particular reason. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the Westmore Club shall submit to the Planning Board an outdoor lighting plan that demonstrates compliance with the dark sky regulations found in Chapter 102 of the Code of the Town of Nantucket, as amended in the 2023 town meeting. It limited exterior construction to between Saturday, Memorial Day, and Labor Day. Westmore Club shall obtain town staff approval for a dust and suppression plan prior to commencement of any construction activity. And it also further basically limited the area that we are in question to no more further development, with the exception of, I believe, up to 2, not more than 200 square foot sheds or structures within this area. Also limited that there should be no lighting permitted in any of the game courts in this area, which there are not currently anyway. So those were some of the conditions that are currently in the draft special permit from the planning board. With regard to this commission and what conditions were placed in the prior order of conditions, the commission finds that the preservation of mature trees is crucial to maintain wildlife habitat and to protect wild and scenic views. As stated, that now overlaps with what the planning board would be requiring, and the stand of trees that you see there will not be altered. And then there was some standard conditions that you had with regard to fill being brought onto the site, no fertilizers, and then roof runoff shall be directed into a subsurface infiltration system. That was all covered when we went through the process with the state, and we provided a full stormwater report for the facility itself. The site itself does have a complete drainage system. The roof drains are all tied to a sediment area or a sediment forebay. It has a detention area, and then ultimately a discharge with regard to the drainage. The part of that requirement with the drainage was that we had to do a habitat analysis, and that was provided as part of the state's filing. That and LEC and Brian Madden had completed that also. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have. Been a long process from the time that we first saw you, but I think it ultimately hopefully appease some of the neighbors. And with regard to the state work, we will, as I said, we have that determination of applicability that was issued. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. And then Brian is also available also.
Thank you, Paul. Questions from commissioners? Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is related to the land subject to flooding, which is a resource area that admittedly we don't deal with that much, but I'm wondering what the flood zone elevation in that area is in comparison to the proposed structure. I see that the proposed structure is proposed to be a slab on grade. And I think the idea of the stormwater management system for roof runoff and rainfall is great. But if we are having flooding at that elevation where the structure is proposed, then we should also have other things like flood vents or permeable surfaces to allow that flood water to be absorbed and contained. So someone could just speak on that a little bit more. That would be great. Thank you.
I'm happy to, Seth. So it's not actually in a flood zone. The isolated land subject to flooding is a calculation based on groundwater inputs, the amount of water that this area can hold, the fact that there's no inlet and no outlet, and we met there's a 1/4 acre foot storage, so forth. But the groundwater elevation for the isolated land subject to flooding was established at elevation 9. The limits of the vernal pool were set at approximately, I believe, elevation 9.5. So they were further up than what we consider the isolated land subject to flooding, or the amount of water that area can hold. The actual elevation, the foundation, there is a foundation system set for the main dwelling. There is a slab for the garage in the maintenance building, and that elevation, the first floor elevation of the cottage is at 24. So it's significantly higher than the isolated land subject to flooding in the vernal pool. So groundwater elevation, pool elevation approximately 9, the actual floor elevation and the grade around the structure is up around 19 or 20. So it's about it's elevated 10 feet above.
And just to elaborate a little bit, and for the record, Brian Madden from LEC. So in the requirement with DEP, when we submitted the wildlife habitat analysis, one of the key components to ensure that there's no adverse effect to the wildlife habitat capacity of the vernal pool system is to confirm that there's no changes or adverse effects to the hydrology of the system. And so we went through a pretty significant review process as it relates to stormwater management, any runoff patterns, et cetera, to manage pre and post conditions so they're match. And there's no like loss of water going towards the wetland or excess water going to the wetland, all within, a reasonable equilibrium. And as Paul mentioned, with all the subsurface infiltration, which is promoting natural recharge And yeah, as Paul mentioned, it steps up quite a bit from the vernal pool and the ILSF boundary, which are all contained within that vegetated wetland boundary.
Thank you, Brian. Any further questions from commissioners? Are there any questions from members of the public? And seeing none, would you like to close, Paul? Do you have a DEP file number on this?
No, actually, we are not. We do not have to file with DEP. We received the determination from DEP that essentially said that the proposed project will not occur within an area subject to protection under the Wetland Protection Act, Mass General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, or the buffer zone. The NOI is being filed only under the local bylaw. So, right. And the reason being is we're not doing any work in the vernal pool, and isolated land subject to flooding, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, under the state act does not carry a buffer zone.
Correct.
So would you like to close?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
And Will, do we have everything we need?
Yes, we do. We'll just be issuing an NAN number on a staff level.
Okay. So a motion to close. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mizzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And that brings us on to item number 10, Sconset Bluff Preservation Fund, Town of Nantucket scheduling. So, yes, Will.
I can start if that works.
Thank you.
So I just quickly made a list of alternate Thursdays that we don't currently have meetings. I know there may have been some potential scheduling conflicts, but I will remind everybody that I don't think there's going to be a vote at the next one. And if you do miss one meeting, you can watch the meeting and read back in. I think Mike brought this up last week, but just email me. I'll send you the form, and it won't cause an issue. But I don't know if it helped. The next 5 Thursdays that we are not meeting would be March 28th, April 11th, April 18th. And I know those are potentially during school break. And then we have May 2nd and May 16th. We can keep going further out, but I was hopeful that we don't.
Thank you, Will. So, Linda, I know that you said you were going to be able, that you couldn't make the 28th. And, but several.
It looks like my family's not coming down for Easter after all.
Ah, well, then is the 28th acceptable to everybody? Good. So the 28th it is. And as a
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We're talking about March 28th?
Yes.
I mean, respectfully, that would require anybody who wishes to make a comment or presentation to have their information submitted by noon tomorrow. And I don't think that's a realistic timeline at this point.
Well, before I recognize you, Will, I just would say that it's a courtesy to SBPF, but it is absolutely not a hard and fast rule. Public comments can come in at any meeting. But I do take your point. Will, you have your hand up?
I was just gonna say I'm under the impression that we're gonna have multiple of these, and I was gonna say it may behoove us to schedule two and not just one now. But just to Seth's point, we've already received a few comments, but I think that we may have more than one of these meetings. If we had, however many meetings we've had from one side, we may potentially have that many meetings on the other side.
Right, right. I think that's very true. Seth, Mark?
Yes, thank you. Ian, I know we're trying to move along in respect for our Wisconsin beach friends. But I am sensitive to the issue of noon tomorrow for a deadline. But also, I think of equal importance, if not more importance, is the need for us to get our attorney on board with answering those, I think, three very important questions, so we can proceed in an enlightened way, and also to get our consultant on board. I mean, we're getting far along with these hearings, and I think that's good in many ways, but I think we need some help here. And
no argument from me, Mark. No argument from me.
So that's just my thought. I mean, I think we need this advice from our professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. And so Seth, I feel that you're going to agree with Mark as I do, and that you feel that the 28th is too early for our next meeting.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, I just think it's important that to talk a little bit more about this. You mentioned that these deadlines are a courtesy to the applicant, and I think that is true in a sense, but it is also a pretty standard practice of the commission. When we have hearings, we require that comments or information be provided by the Friday before. That's standard practice for any notice of intent. So if we were somehow to extend that deadline for this project and not do it for other projects, that would be bad governance, I think. So that's my opinion here.
No, I'm not arguing with you, but nonetheless, members of the public who don't submit comments in advance are absolutely entitled to speak at a meeting, which is, as you agree. So
yes, I'm just saying that if people are going to be submitting written testimony or presentations or whatever, it would be the deadline of noon tomorrow for that, and that's less than 24 hours notice.
okay. So what would you recommend? I'm not going to argue with you.
I mean, I'm glad that we're all available on the 28th, but I would recommend picking the next available date after that.
And fair enough. Joe?
April 11 is the next available Thursday.
It is. It is. Does that meet with Commissioner's approval?
Should.
Thank you.
Yeah,
my
hope.
thumbs up.
My only thought was if it was held on the 18th, there'd be a 3-week gap for everybody to cool off.
That's school vacation week.
That's right.
Are you speaking for yourself?
No,
Okay.
I don't have to cool off. I know what's going on this subject.
I don't think we should meet during school vacation week. So many people involved are out of here.
Well, so
they're out of here between the 18th and the 2nd of May.
No, we only have 1 week off.
Do you happen to know which week it is, Linda?
When is Patriots Day? Because it's that week.
Patriots Day is not on my calendar.
Oh, mine neither.
It's the 15th or the 22nd.
Certainly should be.
I know. I mean,
it's regional.
I'm an environmentalist,
You would think that with me having somebody in school, I would know, but I don't. So
April 22.
It's the 15th.
Okay, then that's school vacation week.
Yeah.
Wow.
Why don't we just go for the 11th? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
we scheduling more than one?
Sorry?
Are we scheduling more than one meeting? Are we doing the whole schedule, or are we just doing one at a time?
Well, I would say at this point, we can certainly schedule another one. We can pencil it in to May the 2nd, which would be the next available time excluding spring vacation. Will, you had your hand up?
You and Tim just covered what I was gonna say.
All right, so commissioners, shall we say April the 11th and May the 2nd?
Sure.
Agreed.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I am available for April the 11th, and I strongly support that. I am not available for May the 2nd.
Ah. Well, I will actually
Well,
be
we're gonna have
calling
to
in.
figure this out.
The
Yeah,
next
I
one
know.
is 5/16 if we want to.
I'm not here. I'm in Florida.
Well,
Class
I'm
reunion.
I'm in Oregon on May 2nd, but I can call in.
I can call in from Paris on May 15th.
Oh, you dog.
I
Sorry.
cannot call in
Scratch
on the
that from the
16th.
record.
I can't call in the 16th. I'm doing dinner for 25 people in Florida.
You might want to
We're
call
not
in.
gonna, there's no way we're all gonna be together, so it's
Can do the 2nd.
the
I can do
reality.
we got a meeting on the 9th anyway, but I can do the 2nd of May.
What'd you say, the 2nd? Oh, no, Seth is
I
not
can
here.
do the 2nd.
I don't know. I don't think there's any way we're all gonna sync our calendars, to be honest with you, but
So, Seth, it's impossible for you to call in on the 2nd of May. I mean, I'll be calling in.
Yes, I mean, if the commission needs to pick that date and I need to use my one absence related to the Mullen rule on that date, then I will do so, but I will be unavailable that date.
Did I see your hand up, Will?
I was just going to reiterate that we can watch a meeting and sign the read-in document if need be.
So, well, we're all available on the 11th of April.
We can just go ahead and schedule that one now and then
Okay.
schedule the next one then.
Yeah,
Would-
figure it
would have
out
been
from there.
wishful thinking.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that brings us on to amended orders of conditions. Oh my goodness, it's already 7:45. Amended orders of conditions, 63 Halbert LLC, 63 Halbert Avenue. Mark Ritz, good evening.
Good evening, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 63 Halbert. This is a project that the commission has seen several times in the last year. I'm before you this evening with a request for an amendment. I would like, or the applicant would like to add two small decks, one on the east side of the house to support some mechanical equipment up above the flood zone, and one on the west side of the building with sets of steps going down to ground. Both decks will be up on piers. They'll be up above the flood zone. Water will be able to flow underneath, and both proposed structures are outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions from members of the public? Okay, a motion to approve this amended orders of conditions. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joe. By roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you, Mark. Minor mods, so there's no request for determinations of applicability for minor modifications. 39 Monomoy LLC, 39 Monomoy Road.
I have to
Brian,
recuse from this one, Mr. Chairman. This is an old project of mine.
sure. Thank you, Linda. So, Brian,
Thank you. For the record, Brian Madden from LEC, representing the applicant. The updates include some revisions to some landscaping details and some patio locations within the outer 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland system. The retaining walls have shifted a little bit further away. And there's just some miscellaneous landscaping updates. No waivers are required for the project. Some of the subsurface infiltration systems have been reconfigured based on the final layout, but the majority of all the work is outside the 100-foot buffer zone with some minimal landscaping within the 100. I'll turn it over to questions.
great, thanks, Brian. Any questions? So, seeing none, a motion to approve this minor mod. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, with Linda Williams recused.
Thank you.
So, this brings us on to certificates of compliance. 14 Easy Street LLC. There are two of them. One's SE 482628, the other is SE 482965. And do we want to take them together or individually? Any opinion, Will?
I'd be happy to take them together.
Okay. Are you taking this?
I don't believe anyone's here to present for this tonight. Pipe in if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody is. But this is for the same property on Easy Street. The first one was for the raising of the existing structure, construction of steps, installation of steel sheeting. It was within land subject to coastal storm flowage in the buffer zone to coastal bank, which is a bulkhead. There were no continuing conditions for either one of these permits. The other one, was for the completion of exterior construction of the existing structure that was raised, construction of parking spaces, patios, wooden decks, and retaining walls. I performed my site inspections. The site was in compliance, and I recommend issuing of the cert for both.
Great.
Also,
Go ahead. Okay,
no, I
Mark.
I'll also move.
Excellent. Good man. Seconded by Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. That brings us on to McGivney, 45 Westchester Street. And you up again, Will?
I'm happy to take this one too.
Good.
This was a small addition that was put onto a house at 43 Westchester Street. There were also no ongoing conditions for this one. The site was in compliance and everything was as it should be. Recommended issuing the cert.
Great.
You said 43, Will, it says 45 on my agenda.
45, sorry.
Okay.
For some reason, I said I was staring at the site plan and I said the abutters property.
Just for the record.
Yep. Thank you, Mark.
Absolutely.
Your conservation agent is sleepy.
Hold his feet to the drawing board. Okay. A motion to approve. Thank you, Joe. Seconded by Tim. Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to 10 Monomoy Creek Nominee Trust, 10 Monomoy Creek. And is Brian Madden still with us?
Yep, I can.
Thank you, Brian.
I can take this one on.
Good.
So this is for an order issued in 2020 for a pool spa, some deck and patio work. We've submitted the as-built and some accompanying site photographs. Everything has been completed in substantial compliance.
Great. Will?
I don't know about ongoing conditions for this one. I just lost the original permit.
Yeah,
It's a pool.
It was a pool, so
we
it's
have
gonna
a
have
bunch.
it's gonna have ongoing conditions. But Brian, I don't know if you have the OOC in front of you. I lost my connection to the office network.
I can pull it up if you give me a second.
Because we just need the condition numbers for the record, but it's going to be all of our pool and lighting, I assume.
Excuses, excuses.
I swear I have a VPN and it disconnects around 7:30 every time we have this meeting.
Who are you hiding from?
The Russians.
There we go.
I am trying to reconnect in the meantime, just in case it's faster, Brian. I'm sorry.
No, I'm almost there. I just looking on the registry website. There it is. Mm-hmm. Can I find it? Oh, I'm on the wrong property. That's why. Sorry. There it is. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23.
And those are all our standard pool conditions, Brian.
Yeah, pool shut.
Could you
Yeah.
share the screen, please?
Yep, I can do that.
Yeah, that'll make it legit.
Give me a second.
Whoa.
Can you see that? Does it come out okay?
Absolutely, with a
Tiny.
magnifying glass.
Yeah,
It's mouse type. But
there we go.
There we
There
go.
we go.
I can only see, there you go. Perfect.
All right. I'll just say for the record, the continuing conditions will be 19 through 23. The pool shall not be drained or discharged into an area within the jurisdiction of the commission. The pool shall not be chemically treated between November 1st and May 1st. All chemical treatments shall stop 3 weeks prior to any draining or discharging of the pool. All lighting shall be directed downwards and away from the resource area. And the applicant shall provide the contact info for the company maintaining the pool. The pool company shall provide a 48-hour notice of any draining to the commission with a plan showing where the pool shall be drained to. I ran out of breath.
So,
so moved.
Okay. And thank you, Brian, for pulling that up.
Thank you.
I don't know, at some point, we're going to add provisions like, because Joe, you're absolutely right that nobody, I don't know if pools are drained every year or not.
Yes, they are.
Then in which case,
But
clearly.
not
not all- I'm
completely,
sorry.
not completely.
Not
about-
completely,
Yeah,
not
About
completely.
2 feet, only about 2 feet.
Right, but so, for future reference, do we want, I wonder if we can condition these that without getting a report every year, that the requirements, they'll have to come before us every year.
We should probably talk about this in the commissioner's comment.
Okay, good, but thank you. Okay, I can see you're smiling there, Brian, so. Yeah, wanting to eat dinner, I'm sure. So, all right, so a motion to approve, including conditions 19 through 23. And thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So thank
Thanks
you,
so much.
Brian.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Yeah.
Too.
So this brings us on to orders of conditions, and I think at this point we have just three. And we're starting with Lampoon Nominee Trust, 6 Westco Place.
Should we,
And-
Mr. Chairman, should we hold this one till they get the language straightened out about the fence and all that stuff until next week? Or the week after that, whatever it is?
You know, that's a good suggestion, actually, because we have, what, 28 days?
We do.
We do. And that would put us on to April 4th.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that's a good idea. Do my fellow commissioners agree?
Yes, I think it's 21 days, but yes, we still have enough time.
It is 21 days, thank you. And when you get to my age, weeks, they just fade into, you know. Anyway, so there we have it. So that was easy. So that gets us on to New England Development 50 Easton Street.
All right. hang on. So this was for 50 Easton Street, the infill of existing wooden decks and replacement of existing seasonal canopies. We had conditions 18 and 19 with no waivers required. Was there any other conditions that we'd like to add to this one?
I think this one went by pretty quickly.
Very quick.
Good. And so I've just upgraded my iOS operating system on my iPad, and it's not bringing it up.
Oh, no.
So here I am with my magnifying glass. Oh, good God. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Do we need any requirement for any silt going into the harbor or anything like that while they're moving this? I guess that would be hard for them to.
So they did have it on the plan. So if we count it as, work shall be performed in accordance with the site and work description, blah, 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 there was a proposed compost sock for any siltation up by the work to be undertaken.
Okay. All right. Any further comments from commissioners? Or a motion to approve is drafted?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seconded by Joe, by roll call vote. Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to Goldsmith, 10 Westmore Lane. So boy, I can't believe this is
Opening.
my iPad is frozen. Okay, I went good.
I'm having technical difficulties too right now, apparently. All right, there we go. Just keep in mind this will not have it still has the original SE 48 number from the first permit, but I'm gonna be assigning it an NAN it'll be 138 or 139. I forget where we left off, but don't worry about that.
You make it a little bigger for.
Oh yeah, sorry. I often forget that I'm on a giant monitor with these. So the order permits the construction of a single-family dwelling, installation of a driveway, removal of a shed, construction of garage, maintenance building with associated grading. Conditions 18 and 19, and then we had 20, no fertilizer or other agricultural chemicals are allowed within the 50-foot buffer zone. And 21, roof runoff shall be directed into a subsurface infiltration system, which was addressed tonight, but that was one of our original conditions on the permit.
May I?
Please do.
So given that we have the certified vernal pool that actually has a 75-foot buffer zone setback, I think we should either say the 75-foot area, or we should just say no fertilizers or agricultural chemicals are permitted by this project. And then I think we should also include the lighting conditions for the structures.
Weird, I thought I had that on there. Sorry.
Yeah, I would support the no fertilizer because they have the court there, and that's going to be using a lot of chemicals, I'm sure, to keep it as pretty and green as it is. Croquet court, isn't it?
Just bringing the screen share back up. And
I believe it's called a green, Mark, not a court.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, well.
How could I be so ignorant of championship croquet?
Loose.
sorry, folks, not to make everything take even longer, but my computer is quite slow this evening, as am I. All right. So here's our lighting condition, and condition 20, does this read fine as no fertilizer or other agricultural chemicals are permitted by this order?
Fine for me.
Isn't that a little harsh? And particularly if they're planting some new vegetation, don't they need some fertilizer initially? I don't know.
Not if they
That's
have
up for
good
debate.
soil.
Yeah, if they have good soil, I agree.
Big root ball off and running.
Yep.
If they do need it to, they could apply for an amendment to this order.
Water, Joe, it's a miracle substance.
Yes, especially when mixed with scotch.
It's almost time, Ian.
Not yet. So any objections or changes proposed?
All right, so that takes into account your considerations, Seth?
Yes.
Okay, would you like to make a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Joe. Thank you, Joe. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to extension of orders. DuPont 22 Burnt Swamp Road. Will?
Sorry, just also responding to an email. Where's my window? Here we go. So this was a permit extension request from Bracken for 22 Burnt Swamp Road. They had an OOC issued on April 28th of 2021 for the construction of a dwelling, installation of pervious driveway, installation of a well, and installation of an IA septic system. minor mods were issued in December of 2021, which allowed for modification to the building footprint. Additional modification was issued in October of 2023 for changes to the driveway, landscaping updates, and a proposed shed. The installation of the shed has not yet begun. They're requesting a 3-year extension to April 28th, 2027.
Okay. Any reason why not? Or a motion to approve the extension?
So moved.
Thank you, Seth. Seconded by Mike by roll call vote. Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. The Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Capon Pond.
I'd be happy to take that one too. I think they might have somebody on for it though.
Hi, I'm on for it. Naomi Valentine from SWCA Environmental Consultants and Karen Beatty from the Conservation Foundation is also on.
Good evening,
Good
everyone.
evening to you both, and thank you for hanging in this long.
Bad.
All right, to proceed.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So as you may remember or have reviewed before the hearing, we've been submitting annual reports on the activities in Capon Pond since the order was issued in 2021. The applications have been overall successful, particularly with the algicide applications when necessary, and they have been, just as we proposed in the notice of intent, only directly to algal outbreaks only when there is above a certain concentration of cells per milliliter in the pond, and there was a noticeable need for algicide application. It's been only one application per year most of the time, and they're all partial because the algae didn't cover the entire pond. So from an algae management perspective, things have been very successful, and the Conservation Foundation would like to make sure that that algicide application is allowable in the future. We're requesting a 3-year extension if possible. The other part of this pond management program was alum application. And I wouldn't expect anyone to remember this, but back when we first presented the project, there was some back and forth on how much alum should be applied. We submitted a separate package on a continued hearing date to sort of take a more moderate approach. And so we did start with that moderate approach and found that the alum rates that we were applying were not sufficient to make a large difference in the water body. We also started with a surface application and moved on to a subsurface like slurry application of a granular product when it seemed like that wasn't going to be inappropriate, that it wasn't making enough of an impact lower down in the water column. And then in the third year, we switched to using a different branded alum product that could be injected lower into the water column. And all of that is just to say that we were seeing changes in soluble reactive phosphorus, but not as much changes to the total phosphorus that we were hoping, which appears to be sort of settling at the base of the pond. And hopefully this isn't like making you gloss over. I just thought it'd be good to paint a picture of what's been happening. When we switched to that product, it was difficult to get the full amount over to the pond, over to the island. It's a product that has to come as a mixed liquid solution. And we've overcome those obstacles, and we're able to get more of the product over on the ferries this year if we're able to extend this permit. And that's all just to say that we've been doing incremental changes. We haven't reached the goal that we set at the beginning of the project, but we've been doing it carefully and documenting everything and testing and reporting those to you all. And so we'd like to have additional time to try to meet those phosphorus reduction goals while still also managing any algae that does pop up throughout the season. And I'll take any questions.
Questions from commissioners?
Here, here.
So I actually do remember the discussion about the alum, and I'm fascinated that they don't allow you to add your own water, which I would have thought to this product, I would have thought would be much easier.
Well, that's why we started with the original product.
Right.
But this one was able to be, the product is more soluble. The other one, when you mix with water, it's, for lack of a better word, kind of like chunky. So
Yeah.
it doesn't go through the subsurface injector the same way. So that's why we switched.
So, do algae mutate like viruses when you apply herbicides? Do they end up getting a resistance? I mean, is that something that comes up?
That is not a question I was prepared to answer. I would
Oh, it serves you
say
right for presenting interesting summation. Excuse
I
me.
would assume that because there's a certain amount of testing required each year to re-up the EPA registration number, that similar topics are discussed. I mean, certainly I've heard it for herbicides and things, but I think the way that it attacks the algae, that's unlikely. But I don't quote me on that being sourced from any kind of scientific paper.
All right, I'll consult Madam Google. You've piqued my interest. Thank you very much for your presentation. And a motion to approve the extension of orders on this. Thank you, Mike and Joe. By roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding. Aye. And thank you both for being present. So,
Gold
Thank
stars.
you. I hope
Thank
you
you for
speed
your
through the
time.
rest of your meeting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So that brings us on to other business. Approval of minutes, January the 25th and February the 1st, 2024.
Make a motion to
Thank you, Joe.
accept.
Thank you. Seconded by Mark. Thank you. By roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye, and I wasn't here for February 1st meeting. I don't know if that means anything when, as far as the vote goes, but
Sure. Joe Pandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, with Mike Mazzarelli abstaining for the February the 1st minutes. Monitoring reports. Do we have any monitoring reports?
We had a couple monitoring reports in the packet. If anybody would like to go into any of them specifically, we may
No.
feel free to
defer.
we may feel free to do so, or we may move on, but I had no issues in my review of the monitoring reports.
Any questions? Discussion of Concom land transfer warrant articles and open space management. And Seth, just to let you know that I read in and read your comments. Roughly 1 hour, 14 minutes and 6 seconds into the meeting, and compliment you on the way you handled the meeting. And so how would you what would you recommend? That we rubber stamp what the select board's already done?
So unfortunately, I had submitted 4 attachments, and unfortunately they were uploaded to the wrong packet. They were uploaded to the regulation packet, not the meeting packet. So have commissioners had a chance to look at them? I'm assuming not.
No.
No.
Not speaking for myself, no.
In that
Seth,
case,
I'm sorry to hear that, not to butt in, but
it's okay. Lisa said they were uploaded successfully. I trusted her, but I guess should have double checked. In that case, although it pains me to say this, I recommend we carry this discussion on to April 4th so that commissioners can review my submissions.
Okay. Duly noted.
for the record, I personally feel bad right now for Seth because this has been
And so you should.
a long time coming.
Okay, a quick self-flagellation is in order.
I'm sorry to be continuing this once more.
Okay. So that brings us on to enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions. And I assume you have something to say on that subject, Will.
I don't really know that I can bring up the specific email that I sent out.
Probably not.
I don't believe that I can.
Well, I brought up with you the fact that, the choir is scattered all the way up and down the east side of the island and hasn't been picked up.
I was thinking of something completely different. I'm sorry.
Oh,
There's a lot going on in the
well,
brain right now.
don't let me interrupt your train of thought.
No, you go, because I think that is a more pertinent.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the original OOC was they pick up before doing any work. They're going ahead with the work like mad and not picking up a thing.
I thought we already told them that they had to do that.
Yeah, we did. They've ignored us completely.
Because why would you continue with the work and not pick up the mess that occurred at the last storm?
Because I suppose
Carefully, Ian.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, Linda.
For Christ's sake, well, somebody needs to have a conversation with those guys.
Yes, Will.
Just for my notes, because I will have a conversation with those guys. Do we have
Get out there, Will, on Monday?
yeah, absolutely, to Baxter Road and where the array is, but I was just gonna ask for my notes. I mean, we're talking about a much larger swath of area, right? That there's debris.
Yeah,
Not
all
just
the way up. Susan Landman who walks the beach.
right.
I mean, we've had reports practically all the way up to Great Point.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
I mean, it really is staggering.
Hmm.
I mean, I've only witnessed it in front of Baxter Road down to Low Beach. But
I mean, I think it's a pretty sizable.
Right.
I'm also sure that we'll hear some sort of response like, how do we prove that it's from our installation?
Where the hell did it come from then?
Yeah,
Out of the sky?
Right.
I'm not really.
Yeah, if I may.
Yes, please do, Seth. I mean, it's really frustrating.
I think we should probably refrain from talking about any specific project until Will gets in touch with them, but it's my understanding that in general for COAR applications, there have been requirements for marking that connects specific materials to specific projects. So there is a way, hopefully, to tell.
Well, apparently so I did bring this up with Jeff, and Jeff said that, we've gone through marking them with individual threads. We've insisted that there actually be sort of metal, dog tags included. The dog tags get ripped off. They had a bundle of choir apparently with 3 different colors thread, all from 3 different projects, all mixed up in a single bundle. And so here we are discussing the fact that the beach is littered and it hasn't been picked up, including, a large amount right underneath the proponent's nose, which I assume is, pretty, as Linda says, it doesn't come from the sky. So,
We should probably stop talking about it until Will can deal with it, and then we'll
Right.
go after it specifically.
Right.
I have a question for Will on the topic, Ian, if I may.
Please do.
Does anybody or Will, do you know if the the emergency order was appealed by anyone?
I do know that it was appealed by at least one person, but I haven't seen any response yet from DEP on that appeal. So they
Thank you.
that's why they're allowed to start work and everything, but it's at their own risk based on outcome of any potential appeal.
Yeah.
When do they have to be back in for their notice of intent? It was 30 days, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is how many days from now?
I would have to verify that from
Actually-
the effective date on the emergency certification. But
I don't actually think that's what the emergency certification says. I think it's 30 days after the emergency has been abated. So, but we could check the actual language. So,
Well, I suppose you could argue that it hasn't been abated until the construction is complete. All right. Any other enforcement action discussion or potential enforcement action?
I hope not.
no.
Okay, so then reports. Crack, does anybody want to jump in for Tim next Tuesday before you, Tim, you tell us what happened at the last meeting? And, okay, I can see everybody's raised their hand, so I'll choose someone. Go ahead, Tim.
Just briefly, there was a joint meeting between CRAC and the Harbors Action Committee. It was really interesting. Linda can talk more about it. She's ran it. But I was impressed with the amount of sort of good coordination that was being attempted. And there's going to be at least another one, right, Linda? Maybe more than one?
Yeah, I'll fill it in when I get to my side.
Well, Linda, if you want to go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, we did have a really good meeting. I think almost all of their members were there and all of our members were there. And we want to spend a lot of time on this section because the previous plan in 2009 and the one before that didn't really address coastal resiliency and floodplain and everything else that's transpired since then in the last 15 years. So one of the biggest sections that we're dealing with right now is that section, because we want to make sure that there's a whole reference to it in the harbor plan, because there's a lot more impact now. And so we're going to be working with them, and Leah is going to be coming to our next couple of meetings because she's got a lot of great notes that she was giving us as we were moving through the section. And we're only not even halfway through that section. So it was very interesting. And we're going to keep in touch. And then Holly was there about the impact on historic structures from the flood zones, and thought it was really positive, very positive, because it looks like we're going to be starting to develop really good requirements in the harbor plan in consort with the CRAC documents and what you guys have come up with projects that you want to do. And I think it's going to be a really good collaboration between us, CRAC, and Holly to get this section really fleshed out.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, important stuff. CPC, Mark?
One more thing.
Yes,
One more
Linda.
thing before we go to CPC. We are discussing having a work group with the land council for the eelgrass plan, separate from the shellfish. We're going to be coming up with some sort of an eelgrass plan, because that really is an indicator of how unhealthy the harbor is, and grants and everything else involved with setting that plan up separately from everything else.
Yes. In fact, I'm looking at my notes and you mentioned that in the March 7th meeting, and you said we're slogging along, which made me smile when you said that. So,
well, we're getting closer.
Yeah, well, the eelgrass, it's just it's really devastating to the scallop harvest. So,
and it's a clear indication of just how disruptive the anchorage is, the over anchorage, certain types of bells that are people
Right.
using for anchor. I mean, it's just, there's a whole bunch of stuff impacting it. And how do we get it back? And how do we
Right.
restrict it without killing people?
Right. Well, and also, of course, fertilizers, the whole 9 yards, so.
Dumping in the harbor. I mean, there's a whole raft of things that affect the eelgrass is probably the first thing that tells you there's a problem.
No pun intended, right? Raft of things. Okay. So, CPC, Mark.
Yes, we did meet this week and we approved one funding for one account, and that was all. We meet again in a month.
Thank you. NP and EDC.
You may not want to ask that question right now.
I know.
I'm going to say nothing germane to the Conservation Commission's.
There we go. I neither affirm nor deny whatever was said in the confidential minutes. Is that what you're trying to tell us? Okay.
Pretty much.
And Joe, no point in asking you, right?
No, not at all.
Oh,
Ian.
Oh,
Ian, there's a lot of wind if you hadn't recognized that. And more coming on Sunday and Monday of this week.
Yeah.
Right. All going to waste. So to
Yes.
speak. Yeah. So
don't be negative, Ian.
All right. Sorry.
Supposed to be on the boat Monday.
I don't think so.
Good luck.
No
with
boats
that.
went today.
I think they were canceled, right?
Yes.
Yeah, even the car ferry was canceled.
Yeah, I squeaked in last night. I said to the guy, who was conducted me to my parking space like an orchestra maestro. I said, "It's going to get pretty windy, isn't it?" And he nodded. And so I was just thankful that I assumed that the crew was the Nantucket crew. Do you remember back in the day when you could predict whether or not the last ferry was going to run, whether they slept on Nantucket or,
Yeah, they didn't want to be over here. They just soon be over there.
Right. So that brings us up to commissioners' comments. And yes, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, this time of year, I'm just confused when we're back to field viewings now that we have more light.
I think 3 o'clock rather than 4.
It's
Yeah.
I think it is.
No, it's actually
now.
4.
4?
4 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if
That's what I said.
Yeah, if anybody recalls my email last week, that was a blunder that I made because it was like 3:18 and nobody was at the office, and I was like, I guess nobody's coming, and I set up my ride and changed my boat ticket. So field viewings are now at 4 p.m. for everybody.
That saves me the panic call to Lisa at like 2:45.
Yeah. So we're all on the same page now.
So I actually do have a comment, and I ask your indulgence to listen. I know it's very late, but in reading in, I was somewhat dismayed by the orders of conditions for 90 Pocomo Road. And the reason why I was dismayed was because it came up in July and August of 2021, and Mark and I, we grew up here as summer brats, and so we remember.
So did I.
And thank you, Linda. So you also remember when the cliffs, the sand cliffs in Pocomo and Pocomo Point were basically, there was no vegetation. And so when it came up in July and August, I presented a series of pictures going back to 100 years to the 1920s, showing clearly that there was no vegetation to speak of. And so even though Art said in 1 minute at 1:04:51, he wanted to clarify that not to plant from the bottom to the top, the entire length of the bank, I would ask that we revisit this to make sure that we put into the orders of conditions, specifically where they shouldn't plant. And so I would like us to basically, under our local bylaw, make a motion to revoke it at our next meeting, or under Robert's rules to either rescind or amend. Obviously, I'd much rather that we had a friendly amendment with Art, but I would like to put it on the agenda for our next meeting. And I
Okay.
thank you, Linda. Thank you. And yes, Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'll maybe talk more if it's on the agenda, but we have to be really careful here because historical precedent isn't what we protect. We protect wetlands. And if the applicant can prove that there's a benefit provided by planting vegetation to protect the coastal bank, it's irrelevant if that matches a historical preference or precedent or not, as long as they're not doing something that would be at the expense of other protected interests, which maybe they are. But we need to make our permitting decisions on the basis of the performance standards rather than on the basis of historical imagery. Thank you. And I hear
You're
what you're
speaking
saying.
generally.
Yeah,
correct?
I'm speaking generally.
So we're not getting any more specific and have an open meeting law violation. We got enough of those going around now.
No, I'm speaking generally that our regulatory review process in our jurisdiction is germane to wetland protected interests, resource areas, and performance standards of those resource areas, rather than historical precedent, because people apply for alterations, or people apply for projects that cause alterations to resource areas and buffer zones on a routine basis. And we have to hear those on the basis of the Wetland Protection Act and the local regulations rather than any other information. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Linda, we certainly don't want to have any, rather than having any extended discussion now, I would like your approval to put it on our
fourth.
Thank you, and on the 4th. So, and
I still think it's worth it. If you want to have a discussion about it with Art and with all of us, I think that's probably on the agenda. I think that's not something we shouldn't do.
Can we be very clear about what the agenda is saying, though? I absolutely do not support an agenda item that says anything about, revocation or strong words like that. If we want to have a general discussion about the permit, that's different. But
yeah,
I think
well,
the process.
Under Robert's rules, we can either rescind or amend the permit. I'm absolutely entitled to ask for rescinding or amending it and putting it to a vote. I'd rather just have it added as an agenda item, and obviously at a friendly level, but also we also are completely entitled to revoke it under our local bylaws. And but I feel very strongly about this, and I thank you, Linda, for recognizing that, and Mark for also recognizing it. And so there we have it. So we'll, unless you want us to put it to a vote, Seth, I would like to see it included in the next agenda.
I think a vote would be an open meeting law violation, but I think you've asked for it to go on. I don't see anybody having any objection to having that discussion at the next meeting, so I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Thank you, Linda.
I'd be hoping for a friendly amendment.
Right, exactly. Will, duly noted.
It's going to go on the agenda as a general discussion, and we'll take it from there.
Excellent, thank you. And Seth, I take your point. and we can agree to disagree if necessary at the next meeting. So, and so administrator staff reports.
Better not have one.
None. I just checked with the rest of the staff and Rusty doesn't have any either.
Okay. He's looking to go for a walk, right? So on that note, a motion to adjourn.
Well, before
Thank
that
you.
though, RJ Turca is offering to buy ice cream for everybody.
Oh, that's true.
Oh,
it's true. So
Maybe for the
It's
next
less
meeting.
than $50.
Adjourn.
if you're expecting us to agree on a flavor.
I'll
so
move to adjourn.
okay. So I'll give it to Joe. You are seconding it, Mark. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding. Aye. Thank you, everybody. And
There's talk of losing our Zoom meetings too.
No, they're requesting, because I just went through this yesterday, multiple texts coming at me from the select board meeting. They're requesting that the planning board and the Concom have hybrid meetings, not losing our ability to have Zoom, but having a hybrid meeting. Now, they can't legally force us to do that, but they didn't give the staff on either one, the planning staff or Will or Lisa or Jeff, any warning that that discussion was going to happen last night. And I think that's what pissed everybody off, to be blunt. So now they're going to be having a conversation with staff, I guess, with us, with the planning board, as to how to do that. But they also acknowledge that it's going to be some time before that can actually happen because we all have notice requirements. So
Timeframe
we're
TBD.
still doing it our way at the moment.
well, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't continue. And if, I understand when there's some special meetings where we need to meet in person, which included with the regulations where we met in person twice. But otherwise, Zoom seems to be so much more utilitarian and so much more useful, both for consultants as well as for us. And so speaking personally, I prefer Zoom. And
We
Well,
already
Lee and I
adjourned
also
this
had
meeting,
that
so we
discussion.
probably should talk more on this until another
Yeah.
meeting.
all
Yeah,
right.
we did
But I
adjourn.
also had that discussion about our engineers and our surveyors, and half of our people are off, most of our people that represent here are off island.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, to be continued. Good night, everybody. Enjoy a windy,
night.
rainy weekend. So,
Hunker down.
yeah.
Good evening, everyone.